It's the middle of the night. Larry and Kelly Schlott are asleep. When all of a sudden,
Larry, what's that?
Sounds like someone at the front door.
Who the hell could it be at this hour of the night?
I'll go check it out. Stay here.
Larry, what are you doing?
Larry picks up a baseball bat. He's ready to use it if he has to.
Louise?
But he's shocked when he opens the door. His neighbor Louise is crying and frantic.
It's Peter, he's been shot. I got 911, I need you to help me.
She knew that Larry knew CPR, so she asked him to come render aid to Pete.
Oh my God. Pete! 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 Oh my God.
Obviously has serious injuries.
Come on, Pete. You with me, buddy?
Larry knows it's not working. It's not going to be able to save him.
A few miles north, Sergeant Joe Kenda is struggling with his own personal battle.
I don't sleep well, and I would often slip out the front door and be on my front porch and smoke a cigarette and think about all the things I've done and all the things I've seen and cannot unsee. And now here we go again.
Within the hour, Kenda arrives on scene and meets with Detective Skip Arms.
Hey, Skip.
Evening, Joe.
When I arrived on scene, there was very little activity going on. There was no traffic in the streets. It was really very quiet. So what we got?
We've got one shooting victim, shot multiple times. He left here in the ambulance alive, but we're not sure what his status is now.
You got an ID?
Yes.
The officer says that the victim is a 35-year-old male whose name is Peter Martinez. He was shot in the front yard of his own home.
Any witnesses?
Martinez's wife and kids were in the house at the time of the shooting, but they've gone to the hospital with him in the ambulance. That's about it.
They've already awakened several of their direct neighbors, all of whom say they didn't see anything. So the only thing left for us there is the crime scene itself. You can learn a lot from a crime scene if you listen and pay attention. The crime scene will speak to you. It will whisper, but it will speak to you.
The victim was lying here when the medical arrived.
What's that?
Looks like a crescent wrench.
Let's make sure we have that dusted for prints. It would appear that the crescent wrench would have some role in this situation. It potentially could have either been an offensive or a defensive weapon.
We also got some casings over here.
How many?
5 total, 25 caliber.
We also found the slugs in the yard, too.
The front yard appeared to be trampled down, so that indicated that perhaps there was some kind of struggle that may have occurred on the yard and then moved into the street. Whatever happened started right here.
My experience tells me there's a confrontation. Words get exchanged, threats are made, things get out of hand, and it ends with gunfire.
Which hospital was the victim transported to?
St. Francis.
Yeah, Skip, I'll meet you there.
Excuse me?
So for now, we've learned all we can here. We need to respond to the hospital where our victim is to determine A, his condition, and more importantly, B, if that's where we believe we're going to find our witnesses.
Mr. Martinez was shot 5 times in all. Once in the shoulder, chest, stomach, and twice in the arm. He's in surgery now, but he looks doubtful. You know, another thing that you should probably be aware of is that the medics said they found him in his boxer shorts when they first picked him up.
Really?
The odds are he was either getting ready for bed or was already in bed. And when he was awakened by something. He came out in his underwear, and whatever happened next resulted in 5 holes in him that he didn't have a little while earlier.
Is his family around?
His wife and children in the lobby.
All right, thanks, Doc.
So we encounter first the wife of the victim, Louise, and she has 2 sons that are with her, Peter Jr. and Eric.
Excuse me. I'm Sergeant Kenda with Detective Irons.
I'm Louise.
Do you think we could talk to you for a minute with you and your sons?
Well, I'd prefer if they had a little more time, but I can talk to you.
They're worried about their father. No point in even attempting a conversation with them.
Could you tell us a little bit about your relationship with your husband?
Well, we aren't technically married, but Peter and I have been together for over 15 years.
And everything was good between you guys?
Yeah, we had a good relationship. We actually work together, so we argue sometimes, but nothing serious.
Peter and Louise are both custodians at a building downtown. Doesn't pay a lot of money and it's hard work, but they get to work together and they enjoy that. And it's something that Louise really is happy about, that she gets to spend her days working with the love of her life.
So what exactly happened last evening?
Well, Peter and I were working and we got home around 10:30.
They went in to check on their boys, and they then made their way to bed.
I'm exhausted. What do we have going on tomorrow, babe?
Eric's got baseball in the afternoon and I'm meeting Lucy for lunch.
All right, well, I think I'm just gonna go get some stuff for this weekend.
Wake up, Peter.
What the hell's that?
Oh, man.
He goes and opens the door, and it's his sister, Karen Michaels,
What's up, brother? You gonna let me in or what?
and her friend Lucia, and they are both extremely intoxicated.
Hey, Louise. Let's have a drink.
They had been at a party, and they came over there to keep the party underway.
Peter and his sister get along?
Sort of. I mean, Karen can be a real pain in the ass.
He was really sometimes super annoyed with her because of her manners and why she lived her life the way she did, of which he did not approve. He thought she drank too much and too often, and so on. So there's always this back and forth between he and his sister, and now his sister's at his front door.
At first, Peter was annoyed, but after a while, he started to loosen up and relax.
I don't know what either one of you are talking about.
I remember the old days.
And they open some beers, and they turn on some music, and they're talking, and they're actually enjoying themselves.
I hope they do another block party. I gotta take a leak. I'll be back.
Everything seemed to be going well.
What's that song?
You can change it if you want. Sarah's in Junior's room. Just try to be quiet. He's sleeping. You want another?
Yeah. You know me?
But all of a sudden, something happened.
Louise heard some type of a commotion in Peter Jr.'s room.
Come on, Lucia, let's go.
Wait, why?
I said, come on, let's get the hell out of here.
What happened? Karen, what's wrong?
Let's get to the hospital.
Louise asked Peter what happened, and his response was, "Oh, that's just Karen. Good riddance, I'm glad she's gone." They then went to bed.
Not 30 minutes after we laid down, we heard people shouting outside.
Come on here, you ass.
Damn it, Karen!
Louise looks out the window.
Get your ass out here, you prick.
She sees 2 cars, a red car and a gray car. And there's a bunch of people out there, and she doesn't know who these people are.
What were they saying?
I don't know, but they sounded upset.
So Louise is going to call 911 to report this problem.
911, what's your emergency?
But before she can say a word,
Hi, there's... So I dropped the phone and I ran outside. The red car was gone and the gray one was pulling away. And Peter was just lying there in the street, all alone.
Do you think Karen could have shot Peter?
I don't think so. I mean, it's her own brother.
Okay, you said you saw a gray car.
Do you know what type of car it was?
Yeah, I think so.
Having this information at hand, it's important for us to try to find the gray car. Starting kind of dispatch. And the occupants of the car. How do you put on APB?
So we offer the description of the suspect vehicle over the air to all officers, all points bulletin. A suspect vehicle in what probably is a fatal shooting. Consider armed and dangerous.
Luckily, it doesn't take long for an officer to spot the vehicle in question.
31 to dispatch.
Dispatch to 31.
Got eyes on that possible suspect vehicle. Go ahead and send me back up 2000 block of Corona Street.
We basically call it a felony traffic stop.
Driver, turn off the car and drop the keys out the window.
They fear that the occupants are potentially involved in a serious violent felony crime.
Do it now.
So the driver was directed to exit first.
Driver, step out, slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them.
He was a tall, black male, which didn't fit the descriptions.
Back up to the sound of my voice. Do it now.
Passenger, step out of the car. Do it now.
When the passenger steps out of the car,
Hands on your head.
she is Karen Michaels, sister of the victim. How convenient. So now we do have the right car, and we certainly have the right people. Now this situation has become dangerous. We're investigating the shooting of a father of 2 children, Peter Martinez. And patrol officers have just stopped a car that was seen fleeing from the scene,
Driver, step out, slowly.
containing an occupant that was involved in a disturbance with the victim.
On your knees.
You're being handled here at gunpoint. Don't do something stupid.
Don't move.
Because of the short time frame between the shooting and the contact of this vehicle,
All right, stand up.
the chances were very high the occupants were involved in the crime.
Put your hands behind your back. Do it now.
So they had to be treated as potentially violent felony suspects.
It's clear.
But so the 2 occupants were driven to the detective bureau. And once there, they were placed in separate rooms.
So what do you want to do?
Why don't you take Karen and I'll talk to this guy.
Works for me.
This individual identifies himself as Hank Michaels, and he is Karen Michaels' husband. And they have this car registered in both of their names.
Is someone gonna finally tell me what the hell is going on?
I was actually hoping that you'd be the one to do that.
We know Karen left the house upset. Did she go home and tell her husband that she had this fight with her brother? And did he come back over to the house in his gray car to avenge his wife?
How'd you end up going for a drive with your wife so early in the morning?
Man, I was sleeping. And Karen came home all worked up.
He says his wife woke him up when she came home. She said she got in a terrible fight with her brother, and she wants him to drive her to her mother's house.
And you didn't ask what went on between her and Peter?
No, I was arguing about something. And besides, Karen was drunk, and I did not want to get her going. So I just drove her to her mother's house.
And as they were in the act of doing that, they're stopped by the police, and they got guns pointed at him, and he doesn't know what's going on.
So you never went to Peter's house at all?
No, not at all.
So there's Hank's story. Is that believable? Well, maybe it is. Think back to Louise. Louise says she sees Karen with some people. If this guy is there to defend his wife, he's the one knocking on the door.
So we try to find a record for Hank. He doesn't have a record. He's clean. At face value, there's no reason to believe he's being deceptive to us. So now our next step is to want to talk with Karen and see where that takes us.
Wake up, Miss Michaels.
What the hell are you doing?
I want to talk to you about your brother.
Which brother?
Karen Michaels is beyond drunk. She's loaded. And she couldn't hit the ground with her hat.
Your brother Peter? Peter Martinez?
What about him?
He was shot 5 times. Do you happen to know who did that to him?
I ain't talking until I get a lawyer.
Well, you're drunk, Karen, but you know enough to keep your mouth shut when you're in a jam. And guess what, baby cakes? You are in a jam.
All right. Well, we're still going to hold you for the time being.
Whatever.
So have we gotten very far? No. We have her, which is useful, but she has nothing to say to us. So now we need another pathway to find out who we're looking at.
So we felt that with some time passing, we would want to circle back and see if either Louise knew anything new or if by this point either of her sons were willing to talk.
Have you received any word on your husband?
He went in for another surgery, so we're just here to get something to eat before heading back.
We were wondering if either one of your sons might be able to talk to us.
I really don't think Eric is, but Junior could probably talk to you. Junior, come here for a minute.
Peter Jr. is in high school. We think he's our best shot because he's a little older and maybe a little less emotional.
Can I have a seat?
And maybe a little more honest.
Junior, did you happen to see what happened to your father last night?
Yeah.
Can you tell us what happened?
I was sleeping in my bedroom when my Aunt Karen woke me up. Hey, Karen, what's going on?
How do you work this thing?
They had long lengths of speaker wire coming from the stereo in the son's bedroom to the speakers in the living room area. Peter Jr. says she wants to change the music, that she can't make this thing operate.
Hey, Karen! Karen, what the hell are you doing in here? Damn it, Karen, don't be disrespecting my house! Just look at my son!
The your radio's crap.
Karen, get the hell out of my son's room now.
Oh, shut up. What you gonna do?
He slaps her open hand in the face hard.
You're always walking around here drunk asking me for money. You don't respect no one. Get out of here.
Go to hell, Peter, you asshole!
She stormed out of the room and my dad told me to go back to sleep. But a little while later, something woke me up again.
Wake up, Peter!
He was awakened, so he gets up in a haze. Looks out the window, he sees his aunt, Karen Michaels. Her children are with her.
Karen, what are you doing, you crazy
And they are in an argument.
Did you see what happened?
Well, I ran outside and tried to help.
Hey, Dad, what's going on? Off my property. Whatever. You care? Get the out of here. Dad, dude, go get my gun.
And the kid says, I didn't know what he meant because we don't have a gun. I guess he was trying to bluff him.
Hey, calm down. Calm down.
Apparently it worked because he saw Karen and the kids start retreating.
I went back inside because I thought it was over, but it wasn't.
Peter Jr. says,
Oh my God, Dad!
He heard several gunshots.
As the gray car drove away, Peter Jr. tells us that he was able to see the person that was in the passenger seat, and that is most likely our shooter. This is the break we need.
Did you recognize him?
Yes, I know who it is.
This whole search process in this investigation has to be to find a good witness, and we have just discovered a star witness. Now, who might this shooter be? We're investigating the shooting of Peter Martinez, who was gunned down in front of his own home.
Oh my God, Dad!
We've now learned that his son, Peter Jr., got a good look at the shooter.
So what's the guy's name?
Jake Ferguson.
So Jake is our dude. It isn't Karen, and it's certainly not her husband.
Who's Jake Ferguson?
He dates my cousin Nina.
The information that Peter Jr. could give us about Jake is he's a white male. He's about 18 years old or so.
He's only been in town a few weeks, but everybody classifies him as a bully, and everybody knows that Jake always has a gun.
Do you know where we can find this Jake?
I think he's in the army or something.
Thank you for talking to us. Yeah, we'll let ourselves out. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we drive over to Fort Carson, and we find out that Mr. Ferguson is living and working on Fort Carson as a private E1 in the United States Army. So we have to enlist the cooperation of military police authorities, and they snatch up Jake Ferguson in a heartbeat.
Jake, I'm with the Colorado Springs Police Department. Do you know why I'm here?
I think so.
You can just see it in his eyes. It's obvious that he's scared. As someone who interviews and interrogates people, you need to gear your questioning based on what you see in order to be effective.
Am I under arrest?
Not at the moment. But I need to know what happened last night.
Okay. I'll tell you everything.
He didn't hold back. He really needed to get this off his chest.
I was at my girlfriend Nina's house. We had a few beers, watched a movie, and then I fell asleep on the couch when her brother Rico woke me up.
Jake, come on, get up, man.
What's going on?
Come on, we've gotta go. She's already in the car. We gotta help my mom. You got your gun?
Yeah, right.
All right, let's go.
The brother Rico tells Jake they're gonna go settle a fight between Nina's mom and her brother Peter Martinez.
He sees this as an opportunity to be an enforcer, to go help the family defend their honor, so to speak.
Who went to Peter's house?
Karen was hammered, so I drove her car. Nina, Rico, and their other sister Marta were in another car.
Peter! Come out here! I want to talk to you!
You ain't gonna hit our mom!
Get your ass out here, Uncle Peter.
I kind of hung back by the car while they went up to the house to confront Peter.
Come out here!
Peter jerked the door open, already in a rage.
Karen, what the are you doing, you crazy bitch?
You a big man hitting a woman
Get the
over here?
off my property!
And is screaming and yelling and using obscenities toward Karen Michaels and her children.
Nigga, learn to control your kids! You don't get to tell me what to do with my kids! I'm gonna kick you, Peter!
Beat his ass, Mom.
Jake says a scuffle begins, followed by them falling down and rolling around in the dirt in the front yard.
Beat his ass, Mom.
Off my property!
Jake said that Karen actually pulled Peter's pants off, leaving him just in his underwear. And then she started laughing at him.
You, Karen? Touch me again.
Hey, do something.
Dad!
Come on,
What's
do
going on?
something. Hey, Junior, go get my gun.
Get in the truck!
So they started heading back to the cars. I go to get in the front, but Karen insisted on driving.
Come on, damn it!
Because Karen was drunk, she was having difficulty getting the car started.
Get the hell out of here! What's wrong with you?
Yo, back up! Back off the car!
Me deaf? Are you drunk and stupid?
I said back off the car, old man!
What'd you call me? Think you're tough, white boy?
Jake says that he then sees Peter reach for his waistband and pull out an object he said was long and shiny.
Jake panics and empties that gun into Peter Martinez from a range of 3 or 4 feet. And every bullet he fires hits him.
Oh, damn. Oh, damn.
Give me the gun. Give me the gun. It's not like he wasn't asking for it.
Even though she was still pretty intoxicated, the fact that she didn't care whether or not her brother just got shot is pretty callous.
What did Karen do with the gun?
I don't know. I think she has it somewhere in the house.
Well, Jake, I appreciate you being honest with me, but I'm gonna have to place you under arrest. Go ahead and cuff him.
Peter Martinez has been pronounced dead at the hospital. So now it's no longer attempted murder, it's just murder.
After Jake Ferguson's confession, investigators go to the house of Karen Michaels in search of the murder weapon.
We find a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol that's obviously been wiped clean, but ballistics says this is the weapon that fired the shots that killed Peter Martinez.
Jake was charged with second-degree murder. Karen was charged with accessory to second-degree murder. And then the district attorney ultimately made the decision to take this case to a grand jury. And after the case was presented to the grand jury, they came back with a no true bill.
Meaning that, in their opinion, there's insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Jacob Ferguson engaged in criminal behavior. So Mr. Ferguson was released without charges, and therefore so was Karen Michaels. And the matter was closed.
You know, it's the kind of thing where really there was no justice. No justice for Peter, no justice for his family, because nobody had to be accountable for what happened to him. Had Peter gone back in the house, closed the door, you know, would he still be alive today? Just makes you wonder. It was just a sad set of circumstances that cost somebody their life.
Mix old family hatreds, loss of control of your emotions, and alcohol, and it often results in violent death. That's a terribly sad thing in the case of Peter Martinez.
Coming up, an unhinged madman threatens the safety of an entire church congregation.
You all will die today.
This is St. Mary's Cathedral. How could this have happened in here?
In January of 1996, the church service was going on. It was Sunday morning, downtown.
How are you?
Near the end of the first service, an usher, Ron Meredith, is passing the collection plate, like they do every Sunday. But a man is sitting in the back. It just seemed a little out of it.
These people don't know what the hell they're doing.
Give it to me.
Excuse me, sir, that's not yours.
Give it to me, damn it. Give me that.
There was a lot of confusion.
Sir, back off.
Ron is able to grab it, and the deranged man told everybody,
I am the Lord Jesus Christ. You all will die today.
that made people very, very nervous.
Honey, call the police.
Later that morning, Lt.Joe Kenda is on his way into work.
Dispatch to X-ray 1.
The radio cracks and it's the 1 X-ray 1. My call sign.
Go for X-ray 1.
Report of a shooting on Bijou Street. Redirect immediately.
Copy that, I'm on the way.
Ooh. On a Sunday morning, when this town is either in church or still asleep? Pretty unusual. I arrived at the address before I realized it's the St. Mary's Church. It's a huge church, a beautiful building. Been there for many, many years. My parents got married there in 1938.
Good morning, Lieutenant.
Morning. So what in the world's going on here?
Come inside, take a look.
So I walk in that church, as I had done many times. I'm directed to the men's room.
Whoa.
This is St. Mary's Cathedral. How could this have happened in here?
Less than an hour before Lieutenant Kenda arrived on scene, chaos was just beginning to unfold at St. Mary's.
Hello, 911?
911, what's your emergency?
A man just tried to steal from our church, and then he threatened to kill us. And I'm afraid he's gonna try to come back.
We'll send units immediately.
Okay, thank you.
CSPD officers immediately respond, including patrolman Robert Benjamin.
In January of '96, I was in the patrol division.
We're here putting the call. Yeah, right here, we did. Is the suspect still inside?
No, he fled. Came in, tried to take our collection plate, and threatened everybody.
Where's the rest of the congregation?
They're inside.
Okay. Can you describe this guy?
Well, he's a pretty big guy.
Mr. Meredith told me he was kind of a stocky build, about 180 pounds.
As Ron is talking to the police, something interesting happened.
Yeah, I think I know this guy. His name's Deersmith. Richard Deersmith.
You sure about that?
Yeah, things happen pretty quickly in there, but I'm pretty sure it's him.
So now they're just looking for a description. They're looking for Richard Deersmith.
Give me a moment, please. Gulf 85 dispatch. Can I get an APB and a white male? 6'2", 180 pounds, name Richard Deersmith.
When officers call in the suspect's name,
Patrol, did you say Deersmith?
it immediately raises red flags.
That's right.
Do you have a pen handy?
So they find out that Mr. Deersmith has a rather extensive criminal record.
So apparently our suspect been arrested 17 times in 3 different states. 2 of those were for assaulting an officer.
So you take that in sum, and this not only is a disturbed person, but he has an inherent violence about him. And he's physically capable of carrying it out.
We have his name and description out there. We're looking for him. You call us if anything else happens.
Thank you so much.
The police leave the scene and start looking for the suspect in the neighborhood.
He resides in the area. Witnesses in his neighborhood report they saw Deersmith leave his house carrying his large knife, which they say is routine for him. He's always ranting out loud and talking to himself or to invisible people, and they are very frightened of him. He's obviously deeply disturbed.
While officers are busy canvassing the area, the congregation picks up where it left off.
A reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthian brothers and sisters. Strive eagerly for the greatest spiritual gifts. Love is patient.
At that time,
Love is kind.
Richard Deersmith returns to the church. And this time, he's got a knife in a sheath on his belt.
And practicing prophecy and mysteries.
Deersmith did something kind of interesting and maybe unexpected. He went straight to the bathroom. The people who really deserve a lot of credit, the quick-thinking ushers.
We need to get the police back out here.
Hey! I said get me out of this room!
Within moments, Officer Benjamin and company are back on the scene.
God will punish you for this!
He's been going crazy in there.
Hey! Hey!
Does he have any weapons on? Yeah, he's got a knife.
We're going to this room!
Lots of thoughts going through my head, knowing we have a combative suspect in front of us.
Let's get out of here.
It was not the first time that he had been involved in potential violence towards police.
The 3 officers go to the door,
Somebody get me out of here!
unlock the door.
Hands up, Richard! Put your hands up, Richard. Hands up! Don't do that, Richard.
The ushers hear somebody say, "Don't do it, buddy. Don't do it."
Richard, no! Don't do it, Richard! Richard, stop!
The church services continue after the dust settles from the emotion of this event. And it's no more than a few minutes after the officers leave, Richard Deersmith comes back in the church. He has a knife, and he's locked in the bathroom.
Hands up, Richard! Hands up!
The police open the door, guns drawn, because they didn't know what they were going to find.
Hey! Richard, stop!
The ushers heard a gunshot, and they thought, God, what is going on in there?
That's when the officers come out. And on their radio,
Need a medical out at the church right now.
a shooting officer involved. As I walk in, I see Richard Deersmith lying dead on the floor with a single gunshot wound in the upper left chest. And you stand there for a moment in that doorway and you look in this men's room and you think, why would that happen? We need to find that out.
Shortly after Kenda examines the crime scene, an investigator from the district attorney's office arrives to assist.
On any officer-involved shooting, the district attorney's office is called immediately.
And there's definitely still a lot to figure out.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk to everybody involved.
Of course.
The district attorney's office conduct all police officer-involved shootings independently of the police department. They are investigating why is it necessary for the police to use great force to effect his arrest.
So we teamed all of our investigators and detectives up together and started interviewing all the potential witnesses.
The eyewitness interviews help investigators piece together exactly what happened when Deersmith returned to the church.
When the ushers at the church saw Deersmith come back, with a knife. You were scared. As they had the opportunity to lock him in the bathroom,
Hey, God will punish you for this! Ah! Let me out!
they found the miracle they were praying for.
When Officer Benjamin responded for the second time,
Oh, God.
he knew the suspect had a history of assaulting police.
I was worried about the safety of the parishioners that were in the church.
He's been in there going crazy. He's got a knife.
Suicide.
At the time, all three officers had their hands on their guns. They were ready for anything. They knew he was armed at this point.
Please, hands up! Hands up, Richard! Put your hands up, Richard.
Deersmith has the knife. It's a 10-inch blade Bowie knife. Very large knife.
Turn around, Richard. Turn around, walk backward toward me. Turn around.
He's not complying. He's just kind of staring right through us.
Turn around, Richard. Richard, turn around and slowly walk back toward me. Good. Keep your hands visible. Okay, back up toward me. Very good. Hands up. Keep your hands up where I can see them. Nice and slow. Good. Good. Hand up. Do not put that hand down. Do not touch that knife, Richard.
There's something called a continuum of force, and this is how police officers are trained. You confront someone, you announce to them that they're under arrest. If they physically resist you, you are authorized by law to use whatever force is necessary to overcome that resistance.
Don't do that, Richard. Do not touch that knife. Stop!
I am the Lord Jesus Christ!
These people don't know what the hell they're doing.
Oh, God, Lord, let me out!
Richard, do not touch that knife! Don't do it, Richard! Richard, no! Richard, stop!
He reached for the knife. At that particular point, I knew I had no other option.
It's a very difficult thing to take a human life. It is. Policemen are trained. Officer Benjamin followed his training to the T. He handled that perfectly under the worst possible circumstances, but it is a devastating emotional effect on the officer.
It wasn't until after everything had calmed down that I started to think about what had transpired. You know, just playing over and over in your head, and you start to sometimes second guess yourself, well, what if I'd have done this different?
In this particular case, the ruling from the district attorney was that the police officer was justified in using deadly force against Mr. Deersmith.
No charges were filed, and the matter was closed. And Mr. Deersmith was left to a higher court.
You never forget it. Quite frankly, it's tough to sleep. You know, it just plays continually in your head, and you eventually come to the conclusion that you had to do what you had to do, and it was necessary, and you know, you just move on from that, but you never forget.
I was very fortunate in all of my years as a policeman, even though I displayed my weapon probably 20,000 times. I never pulled the trigger, never once. We're in the business of saving people, not killing them. Officers try anything to avoid it, and they suffer sometimes for the rest of their days if they're called upon to do it.
Snow remembers. It keeps the sound of a wheeled suitcase thudding over cracked sidewalk. It keeps a boot print that never quite fills in, even when the plows pass and the salt burns. It keeps a breath, a plea, a name spoken into a scarf. Toronto, January 2001. Wind off the lake like a blade, streetcar bells clanging in the dark. A woman turns the corner at 2 a.m, 3 blocks from home, and the city inhales as if holding a note. She never arrives. Morning comes anyway, coffee shops open, the radio hums, a neighbor knocks on a door no one answers, and the cold begins its work, the long, methodical work of hiding things in plain sight. Her name is easy to say and hard to stop saying. Posters go up on utility poles, faces of other missing people staring beside her, a chorus of vanished. The printer ink bleeds in the sleet. Someone mumbles, "Mat tick be on." Someone else says cold case, because the phrase fits the weather and the silence. There is a small shrine at the corner, tea lights trembling in glass jars, a knitted red scarf looped over a fence post like a question. The scarf is not hers. Or maybe it is. Memory makes liars of us, and the city is 1,000 memories stacked together, leaning. Detectives walk the route. Alley, back gate, parking lot, the mouth of a laneway with a burned-out streetlight. They listen to the hiss of a radiator behind a basement window. They collect cigarette butts, footprints, a smear of something that might be blood or rust. They go door to door with photographs and a tone that says, "This is real, this is happening, we are not sleeping through this." A bartender remembers an argument, or thinks he does, because nights blur and voices carry. A neighbor remembers a white sedan idling, another insists it was a gray van. A man in a corner unit says he heard a laugh, high, bright, cut off like a radio switched off mid-word. The city reads headlines over breakfast, over transit, over the hum of fluorescent lights in offices where nothing smells like outside. Shock in the community. The phrase repeats, climbs the steps into every apartment. Mothers walk their children home with an extra hand on a shoulder. Dogs tug leashes towards snowbanks that might hide anything. In the precinct, a corkboard fills with maps, arrows, Post-its with times written in block letters. A detective draws a circle around the spot where the suitcase wheels stopped. Another draws a line to the lake, not because there is evidence, but because the lake is where lines go when they run out of places to point. He was seen with her once, someone says. The ex, the coworker, the neighbor who always smokes on the balcony at 2 a.m. The city becomes a list of names with question marks attached. The detectives look tired fast. They look older by Thursday. They request tapes from a convenience store camera that hums in a metal cage like a trapped bee. 12 minutes are missing. Technical malfunction, says the owner, shrugging, glancing at the price of gum that needs to be restocked. 12 minutes. The length of a coffee left to go cold. The length of a bad decision taking root. The length of a prayer said twice. Time dilates when nothing breaks. Hours elongate until they bridge weeks. The posters fade to pink where they were once red. The shrine gets knocked over in a storm. Someone resets the candles. Someone gathers up the glass. A detective sits in his unmarked and watches the corner from midnight to 3, the same 3 hours the wind sounds like a dial-up modem connecting to nowhere. He writes a note. Witness mentions scarf. He underlines it. He goes back in daylight and finds the scarf gone. The fence post is bare. He stares at the empty post longer than he meant to. Then he writes another note. Possible souvenir? He doesn't like the word souvenir. He scratches it out and writes token. Then he scratches that out too. A reporter pushes the story hard. Live hits from the corner. The camera fogs. People who never knew her feel like they did. They want a suspect. They want a man in cuffs, head down, jacket over his face. They want a name to staple to the fear. But the investigation blooms into too many petals. An empty locker at her gym. A laptop with a missing hard drive screw. A phone that last pinged a tower by the tracks just as the 3 a.m. freight roared by like a long iron river. The laptop yields browser tabs open to job applications in another city, to a message board for winter boots, to a news clip about a case from 1995 that haunted her. People get haunted by other people's missing. That is a truth detectives learn early. There is one witness no one believes at first, a man who sleeps under a bridge and speaks in riddles. He says he saw a handprint on a frosted window, 5 dark ovals of breath melting the ice from the inside. He says he heard a voice say help, then another voice say shh. He says the second voice sounded like it wore a uniform. The detectives mark it down because they mark everything down. Uniform, security guard, off-duty. They search loading docks. They walk the underground mall in circles until the geometry makes their heads ache. The city has tunnels like veins. Somewhere, something circulates, unseen. Years unspool, a calendar page you can't tear free. Cold case, the file tab says now, because the department must put names to shelves. The detective who circled the lake line transfers out. The reporter moves to a different beat. The shrine disappears for good, though the fence post remembers the pressure of the scarf. People move. New tenants don't know about that winter. The city layers itself the way vinyl piles onto a turntable of songs about leaving, staying, never quite getting there. But the mother doesn't move. She keeps the same phone number in case the past needs a landline to find her. She keeps the same plant watered too much, leaves always nearly yellow. She keeps her daughter's keys on a hook near the door, heavy silver with a tag stamped with an address that never changed. Breakthroughs arrive in stories like lightning. In life, they are more like a click that didn't sound important until the door swings open. A small team reviews old evidence with new eyes, new tools, new faith in the idea that rust can be scrubbed from truth. Boxes come back from storage. A clerk cuts through brown tape. Inside, a scarf fiber sealed in a tube, a cigarette butt, a flake of paint from a door frame taken on a Tuesday when nobody had slept. The tube fogs when they breathe too close. They label everything again, like baptizing objects a second time. DNA. The word rides the air like a promise in a dare. They run the profiles, not once, but over and over, against databases grown since the days when phones still flipped and music lived on discs. Most come back nothing. One returns a partial. Not enough to stand on, enough to stare at. A technician, patient hands, quiet voice, says wait, says run it again after the weekend because the system updates Sundays. The weekend passes a lifetime. The city has a heat alert and an air quality alert and a traffic alert because modern cities do alerts the way old forests do birdsong. Monday, the lights hum, the partial grows a cousin. Then a name branches from that cousin like a line drawn on a family tree where a secret lived. Investigative genetic genealogy, says the memo. A string of syllables that feels like a door unlocking on the 20th try. They don't say the name out loud at first. Names echo. Names wake sleeping dogs and sleeping men. They check the file. Where was he in 2001? Working nights. Security, of course. Near the tunnels, near the loading docks. His HR record says he never missed a shift, but a supervisor note in the margin mentions tardiness once, twice the week she vanished. He got a warning. He signed it with a small, careful signature like the last footprint before the snow swallowed the trail. He drove a white sedan then, or a gray van, depending on which memory you believe. They find the bill of sale, white then, and then later, sold for parts, dismantled, its metal scattered like seeds. The paint flake in the box, the one from a doorframe, matches that paint code as if paint remembers the doors it brushed. No one storms anywhere yet. This is not television. This is breath held in a hallway while the printer spits out warrants. This is a sound beyond the door you don't love because you don't love any sound you can't name. The detectives move in pairs. The city watches without knowing it's watching. Eyes behind blinds, cameras behind domes. They knock. He opens. He is older now. Faces travel. Eyes stay put. He has the eyes from a photo taken in a break room 24 years ago. A paper plate in one hand, a smile that doesn't bother to reach. He says he remembers her face from the posters, like everyone remembers that winter. He says he worked a lot of nights, saw a lot of faces, can't be sure. He says he's sorry about whatever happened, the way people say sorry for storms and war and the hard luck of other families. A living room holds small things that suddenly have scale. A ceramic lighthouse, a stack of manuals, a box of old uniforms in the hall closet with a patch sewn on by a hand that didn't mind crooked stitches. They ask for a voluntary swab. He laughs softly, surprised by the audacity of the words voluntary swab spoken in his doorway, as if they were saying, would you like to try a sample of summer sausage at a grocery store? He says he wants a lawyer. He closes the door softly, respectful as if not to wake a child who has already moved out. The detectives look down the hall at nothing in particular and see it all. The 12 missing minutes, the scarf on a fence post, the circle on a map that once touched the lake like a fingertip on a bruise. The door opens again. He stands there holding a disposable cup. He says, "Water?" As if this is neighborly, as if something could be washed down. They decline. He shrugs. He drinks. He wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. His knuckles are small, pale hills. He says, "You people never quit." A detective says, "No." The man nods, a tiny ceremony for a truth that traveled years to arrive on this mat. He says, "If I give you what you want, does it go away?" The detective doesn't answer because the answer is no, but the ritual demands silence here, like in churches before the hymn. They swab. Later, a lab machine sings. Data stacks. Lines align. The yes arrives on a screen at 2:14 p.m., banal in its font, divine in its finality. The scarf fiber, the cigarette butt, the paint flake, the partial that grew a cousin. Each thread braids into a rope strong enough to pull a ghost to shore. They go back with handcuffs that click like small doors shutting. He looks at the metal as if it's jewelry he doesn't like. He asks, "Is this necessary?" Someone in the hall watches through their peephole and whispers, "Arrest shocks community," as if reading a headline straight off the air. But this is not the end, not for the mother with the landline, not for the detective who circled the lake 20 years ago and still wakes when the wind shifts off the water. Solved is a word that sells papers and calms the city for a night. Solved does not rewind the 12 minutes or unspool the scarf from the fence post. Solved does not return a suitcase to a hand that was warm once. Solved simply changes the shape of the silence. It gives it edges. It lets the candles burn out without needing to be replaced. It lets the city exhale and realize the breath it held became the winter itself. And yet, in that exhale, another story begins to whisper. The hidden locker, the missing screw, the tunnel where the geometry hurts your head. The voiceover keeps moving, past the flashing lights, past the camera vans, past the door finally closed, because snow remembers. And the lake keeps its secrets until you ask the right question at the right hour and listen long enough for the city to answer in a voice made of steel rails and wind and a name spoken into a scarf that, now, at last, is coming home. The room hums like a beehive, and the clock pretends not to exist, and he sits with his hands folded as if he were waiting for a bus that will never come, a man who learned to blend with walls and with winter and with the quiet parts of the city where security guards swap stories they never tell their spouses. And the camera blinks its red dot, and the tape rolls, and the microphone drinks every breath, and the lawyer clears his throat because that's part of the performance too. And the detective, who once drew a line to the lake, speaks low, even, a metronome in human form, running through the 12 minutes that unstitched a neighborhood and stopped a calendar and taught a mother how to live inside a ringtone. And the suspect says he doesn't recall, and he says it like a phrase he spent years sanding smooth, a riverstone of denial, no sharp edges for the current to catch. Outside, the headline repeats itself into 1,000 kitchens and bus shelters and corner stores. Arrest shocks community, cold case breaks, long night ends. Except endings here only adjust the light. They do not close doors. They do not give back the warmth that left the suitcase handle. And the mother holds the phone like a votive and tells the dial tone she is listening. She is ready. She is not afraid, which is only half true. The detectives unspool a map of tunnels and service corridors and locked doors that open if you hold your badge at the right angle and believe. And they show him photographs with ruler marks and tiny flags that make tragedy look like a model train layout. And they ask again about the week she vanished, and he talks about rosters and schedules and an overtime slip that never made it to payroll, and he smiles at a memory only he seems to like, and the lawyer taps his pen to say enough. The city remembers other winters, other names. Missing posters that became wallpaper on a back alley, and then snow mulch come March. A talk radio host says this proves the system works if you give it time. And a caller says this proves the system forgot until somebody younger with a new password logged in and cared. And somewhere in between, the streetcar bell announces another stop, and the driver stares at the tunnel mouth where once a uniform stood smoking, not moving, like a punctuation mark at the end of a line nobody could read. The lab prints out numbers that don't look like grief until you line them up, until you realize a scarf fiber traveled 24 years to land in this fluorescent afternoon and raise its small hand and say, "Here." The tech with patient hands walks the detectives through the tree that grew from a surname nobody spoke out loud at first. Second cousins and third cousins whose family barbecues have photographs that suddenly matter. Faces in lawn chairs under a green tarp. An uncle with the same tilt of head. A grandmother who wrote recipes in a spiral notebook now stored in a plastic bin marked linens. And how an obituary cracked the branch that led to a birthday, that led to a hiring form, that led to a badge, that led to a door, that led to a hallway where the air tasted like metal and something unfinished. An old janitor shows up after the press conference, hat in his hands, voice like gravel shaken in a paper cup, and says he remembers a night when the freight rattled the glass, and the freight does that every night. But this night the elevator stalled between floors, and the light flickered, and he pushed his key. and when the doors slid open, a uniform stood there without a face, a man looking away as if not to see himself reflected, and the janitor smelled cold, and the cold smelled like a scarf dried too close to a heater, and he went home and pushed the memory down because men his age were raised to sweep both floors and thoughts. The detectives checked keycard logs and find gaps you could pour a life through, gaps explained as outages and firmware bugs and power blips blamed on weather that was not unusual, and they find a maintenance ticket put in the day after she vanished, a polite note about a camera that resets itself at the worst times, and the ticket is signed by a name that matches the signature on the warning he got for tardiness that week. That small, careful signature, like a last footprint before the snow says no more. They put the evidence on the table like a constellation. The paint flake and the cigarette and the scarf fiber and the map of where he patrolled and the printout of a partial that grew a cousin and flowered into a yes. And they put a photograph of the fence post where the scarf once hung, and his eyes do a thing when he sees it. A twitch, a blink, a flinch too small to file but big enough to feel, and the lawyer covers it with his voice and asks for a break and asks for coffee and asks for common sense, and the clock keeps pretending it's not there. He says he knew her face from the posters like everybody did. He says he never met her. He says he walked those corridors like arteries and never bled on any of them. He says he checked doors like a prayer and wrote times like a monk and went home to a quiet kitchen and boiled the same noodles on the same burner and turned on the same late movie where the hero runs and always catches the train. He is boring on purpose. Bored men vanish into floors. Bored men write over minutes with other minutes until the tape is too thin to rewind. The detectives leave him to his lawyer and step into a hallway where the coffee tastes like copper and compare notes that read like a scripture nobody wants to claim. And one says, what if those 12 minutes don't stand alone? What if they are a stanza in a longer song? And the other nods because behind another box, another label, a forgotten slip calls from 1999 with a woman who walked a different corridor and was pulled back by luck or an alarm or a friend who insisted on one more drink, and 2003 too. A college kid who dropped her ID and bent to pick it up and heard a shoe scuff behind her and ran and filed a report that didn't stick because reports don't stick if nobody bled. Patterns are a kind of weather. You learn to read the sky. They pull archived incident logs, and the pattern steps forward with its hat off like a polite man who never raises his voice. Service corridors, late nights, camera resets, gaps, a uniform scene just before something almost happened or did. The mother, told of the arrest, tells the window she wants facts, not consolations, and then tells the window she will take consolations too, and she opens a drawer where she keeps her daughter's keys, and she sets them on the table like an anchor, and the table welcomes the weight. The city debates ethics, DNA and databases, and cousins who never consented to become compasses. A columnist says justice wears new shoes now and they squeak, and a privacy advocate says every door you open expects you to knock first. And the mother reads none of it and waters the plant too much and tells the leaves that the cold case is not cold in this room where the heater clicks like knitting needles. The defense files papers with edges sharp enough to cut, questions chain of custody, questions the way a fiber spent years in a box and still remembers which scarf it came from, questions the janitor's memory because elevators stutter all the time, questions the tape because tapes stretch, questions the cousin tree because trees fall in storms. Questions everything, as is his job. The prosecutor breathes and stacks and highlights and says we have more than a story, we have more than a feeling, we have the narrow geometry of a life that intersects with a vanishing, that walks beside it, that smokes where it shouldn't, that signs where it didn't have to, that resets a camera at a moment that grew teeth. And still the city wants a scene it can understand. A march, a vigil, a candlelight spine down the block. They get a bail hearing instead, beige as a waiting room, filled with whispers that sound like wind through escalator grates. He stands. He sits. He hears the words the rest of us hear only in crime shows, and he looks at the floor as if the floor can advocate for him. The detective who once circled the lake goes there after court, to the shore that takes the city's sound and irons it flat, and he walks with his collar up and says her name once, quietly, a syllable he never owned but carried for a while, and thinks about tunnels and blind spots and how cities are built to move us without asking us to look at what moves us. Back in the lab, a clerk notices a box labeled Holiday Party 2001 under a shelf that should hold lighting spares, a box that should be in the media cage and isn't, a box with mini DV tapes no one digitized, the kind of plastic thin enough to forget, and inside are office laughter and cheap tinsel and a raffle and a door in the background that keeps opening and shutting like a heartbeat. And at the 27-minute mark, a reflection crosses a dark window, the ghost of a badge, a smear of white like a sedan drawn by a child, and a time code that bites into those 12 missing minutes like a lock accepting a key. And the clerk freezes the frame because ghosts deserve respect, and she calls upstairs, and the detective says, "Don't move." And everybody moves anyway, because that is what you do when a dead city muscle twitches. The lawyer calls the mother and suggests she not watch the news, and the mother thanks him for the kindness she cannot afford, and she watches anyway, and the anchor's voice wraps the story in a blanket of cadence that warms without heating, and the words "cold case" and "solved" and "shock" and "community" march like small soldiers across the bottom of the screen, and somewhere a bartender hears the script and remembers the argument he maybe heard or maybe borrowed from another night, and he decides he did hear it, and he phones the tip line and adds a piece that might be cardboard or might be steel, and the tip line volunteer writes it down like a psalm. Night stretches. The city blinks the way cities blink. The suspect tries to sleep on a thin mattress that smells like bleach and years and calculates the angle at which doors once opened when he held his badge just so. Muscle memory like a lullaby for men who live between thresholds. A guard walks past. He does not slow. He has seen in his years how guilt and innocence both wear the same shape when the lights never turn off. In the precinct, the detectives lean over the frozen frame with the reflected badge and the smeared white, and someone pulls a photo from a 24-year-old employee ID drive, and someone else overlays lines like a transparent sheet teachers used on projectors once. And the lines kiss, not perfectly, but close enough to make the air feel charged. And the tech, with patient hands, says there's more on the tape. The next minute shows the door wedging with a foot, a practiced move, and the foot wears a shoe that security issued that winter and not the next. A tread pattern that lived for 6 months and then died in procurement paperwork, and the tread matches a partial in a snow print collected before the plows scrape the corner, and the box of tinsel becomes a box of knives. The city does not cheer, the city holds still. It has learned the shape of stillness. It knows how to wait without naming it waiting. Somewhere a train screams a curve, and somewhere a mother counts rings that don't happen, and somewhere a fence post stands naked in moonlight and still remembers pressure. The story is not done. Solved is a word we say to help sleep. The voice that threads this city keeps talking, low, even, a metronome that will not stop. There is a hallway to walk, a door to open on the 27th minute, a ghost to greet, a silence to measure with better tools, and there is the question that remains after every arrest and every press conference and every careful signature. Who opened the door first, and why, and what became of the 12 minutes we paid for with years? They roll the party tape again, and the 27th minute grows teeth and a spine and a pulse, the door cracking open to a sliver and a shoe holding it like a practiced lie, tread lines like fingerprints. Nobody thought to collect in 2001, a security issue pattern that lived only one winter before procurement changed suppliers. An ankle turning inward to keep the wedge, a hand with a badge grazing the jam because muscle memory doesn't care who's watching. The lab freezes the frame until the pixels feel like gravel under nails, and the detectives measure angles the way carpenters do when a wall leans, and one of them whispers the timestamp like a prayer because numbers can be holy if they arrive in the right order. The tape does not show her. It shows a path. It shows a choreography learned across long, quiet nights when the city slept with one ear open. They walk it in real time, clipboards tucked to ribs, a stopwatch running, the tape in their heads like a drumline, alley door. Short service stair, freight elevator that needed a key and patience, corridor painted a color nobody remembers, and therefore everyone remembers. Out to a loading bay where a white sedan's nose once tasted winter air. 12 minutes becomes 11 and change if you don't stumble. 12 if you do. He did. The taped angle shows a wobble. He did. A judge signs before coffee cools and the warrant breathes like a living thing, paper turning into passage. They go to the apartment with the ceramic lighthouse and the manuals stacked like a wall too low to hide behind. And they go to a storage unit leased under the ex-wife's maiden name, a lock that looks unimportant until you feel the weight in your palm. Roll-up door takes a ribbed breath and rises. Inside, the hoarded inventory of a life that kept souvenirs without admitting to it. Boxes marked winter gear, and taxes and cables, and the lying word miscellaneous. A uniform folded in thirds, a badge pouch without the badge, a door wedge cut from a belt, leather gone gray, a jar of screws and odd fasteners, the kind men gather for the comfort of someday. A set of old security shoes with that 6-month tread, scuffed as if pacing an empty floor could wear a man to nubs. They inventory each item like it might bite. A scarf appears and everything stops, but it is not red, not the shrine's color. It is a faded gray with a pulled thread and a coffee stain shaped like a continent. The lab will talk to it later with light and powder and silence. For now, it sits like a small cloud, waiting to rain. They find a spiral notebook with numbers and columns and arrows that tie nights to doors, a patrol route documented like a migration, and in the margins there are notes a man writes to himself when nobody else will ever read them. Remember 4, always check 3. Camera resets at 2 if you coax it. A manual with a yellowed tab explains the coaxing and underlines a line about power cycling the unit. And the underline is not straight. The underline had a pulse. They collect a laminate with a cracked corner and the ghost of a name rubbed off by years of thumb. They collect a bundle of old lanyards, knots tied absent-mindedly while talking to no one. They collect a grocery bag full of holiday party tickets from a raffle 24 years ago, the kind you tear and tuck in your pocket and forget until memory stops cooperating and you need proof you once stood in rooms with other people laughing. Meanwhile, the city chews the headline like a tough cut and swallows anyway. An old coworker sees his face on the 6 o'clock and calls in with a voice that shakes the way glass does when a truck goes by. Break room. Coffee burned to tar. A story about an elevator that stuck that week and a man who returned from a smoke with the particular calm you learn from changing stories mid-sentence. The coworker mentions a key card trick he joked about, a way to make a light go green when it wanted to stay red. The detectives log it with a gravity that wakes the building's bones. They drive north to a scrapyard with ledgers older than the internet and a dog that sleeps like a king on a bed of chain. The owner remembers a white sedan that arrived in the spring of 2003, remembers because a door panel was sold to a hobbyist who came by with a list as neat as a grocery run. He has an address because paper does not forget like people do. The address becomes a dirt road and a shed with walls made of other sheds. The hobbyist kept everything. The door panel leans where light falls like water, the trunk liner cut and used to muffle a generator, and that, at last, is a manmoikila made physical, a piece of somebody else's errand now carrying the grit of another night. The lab likes lint. Lint is testimony. They lift from the fibers a minimum wage of truth. Halite crystals from road salt, blue dye from a de-icer brand the city stopped using in 2002, dog hair maybe, human hair definitely, and a red fragment that could be scarf or glove or kindness. The red in a microscope looks like a shout you cannot hear but cannot ignore. At the mother's kitchen table, the plant insists on living, and the keys on the hook insist on hanging, and the phone rings with both kindness and noise. Reporters call with careful voices. Volunteers call to say they remember. Strangers call to apologize for being strangers. She says thank you in a tone that sands edges down and goes back to the real labor. The ritual counting of steps to the door and back, the moving of a coaster 1 inch to the left, the ordering of photographs until one finally decides where to rest. She takes the bus to the corner where the shrine once was. The fence post stands like an amputated sentence. Kids are chalking squares and swearing they understand the rules, and she watches the chalk dust rise like steam and chooses not to interrupt. She places a small candle on the sidewalk and lights it with matches carried for decades for this single act. Nobody tells her she cannot. Nobody tells her she must. In the windowless lab, the tech with patient hands lines up microfibers taken from the gray scarf in the storage unit beside fibers from a sweater recovered from the victim's apartment 24 winters ago. A sweater kept in a garment bag that her mother never opened because air felt disrespectful. The microscope speaks 2 difficult words: possible transfer. The scarf sat in a place where her sweater had been, or her sweater brushed a place where the scarf had rested, or air carried in a bus's crowded aisle did the simple mechanical work of mingling tiny threads. Science rarely gives certainties. It gives shape. It gives range. It narrows a room full of doors to a hall with 3. The door wedge cut from a belt becomes a sermon. The detectives try it in the freight door from the tape, not the same door but the same model, and the wedge holds with a polite stubbornness that says, "I was made for this." They find on its leather edge a faint impression of varnish, the hue twin to the jam shown in the 27th minute, and they take it to a chemist who paints light on it until a whisper of adhesive fluoresces, a glue used on that door and a handful like it. He kept the wedge because he trusted it more than his hands. Men like tools more than they like luck. Luck is faithless. A prosecutor builds a spine from everything not soft: the tread map, the party tape, the trunk liner blue with de-icer, time-stamped by chemistry. The cousin tree that did not ask permission and nonetheless grew. The gap in the keycard logs that his pen explains but physics does not. The manual with the coaxing underline. The elevator stall told by a janitor, retold by a coworker, retimed by a watch. The judge denies bail again and the room breathes at last. He is let out, and for a second, in the reflection of the glass, he is still in uniform, still the punctuation at the end of corridors. Then the reflection flickers, and he is just a man with skin and pulse, and a history that now has an outline drawn around it in black marker. They bring cadaver dogs to the tunnels, not because they expect a body, but because dogs are honest in ways machines are not. And in a blind corner by a service gate, one dog sits with the gravity of an old priest. The handler writes it down. The concrete hold smells like paper holds ink. The team scrapes the seam where floor meets wall, and the lab calls back with something that cannot be called blood because lawyers know how to sharpen words, but it cannot be called anything else. Trace iron, trace life, trace past. They do not tell the mother yet. They do not bring her to the tunnels. Mercy is sometimes kept small on purpose. The ex-wife's voice arrives wrapped in fatigue. She remembers nights he paced and nights he did not come home, and a box he moved from apartment to apartment without opening. The one now in the unit with the label cables hiding a smaller box inside, taped and retaped. And inside that, a little metal tag from a wheeled suitcase brand sold by only 3 shops in the city that winter. One shop confirms they sold that model to a woman with her name, receipt ink faint but legible, date circled with the urgency of an ordinary day. The tag, bent at the corner like it once tried to escape, becomes a small star on the prosecutor's constellation chart. 12 minutes can steal a life. A bent centimeter of tin can bring a portion of it back to the living. An analyst overlays the route of those 12 minutes with the service logs, with the card gaps, with weather data that says, the wind that night knifed east to west, which means snow drifted into the loading bay from a direction that would have filled tracks if there had been tracks. A detail that comforts no one and pleases the analyst because truth sometimes has no purpose but to be precise. He writes in his report that probability leans and probability is not proof, and then he gives the detectives a simulation that walks a figure through a 2:14 a.m. landscape using the taped angles as waypoints. The figure is a ghost made of lines. The ghost knows where to put its foot. He does not confess. Men like him rarely do. He says the words taught to men in razor-bright rooms. Not me, not there, not then. He says he was a good employee except when he wasn't. He says lots of people had access. He says the dog could be wrong, the tape could be tricks of light, the trunk liner could be any trunk's memory of any winter. He says the door wedge was for drafts and the journal was to stop forgetting. He says the keys on her mother's hook are proof of nothing except that keys outlive doors. The detective listens without blinking because blinking is something you do when either truth or lies arrive, and he is not granting either the dignity of reaction. He lets the clock pretend to be absent and asks again about the party, about the raffle, about the door opened like a throat and the shoe that held it open. The lawyer says enough and then says it again softer because even he hears the shape of what is being built. The city begins to tell the story back to itself in barbershops and in bus aisles and in foyers that smell like dust and laundry soap. People add flourishes that do not belong and correct details that do, and still the core holds. A winter, a corner, 12 minutes, 24 years, yes. The mother stands at the window when the sun drops behind the towers and speaks to the glass like it could move prophecy. She says her daughter's name in the dark, and the name sits in the room like warm bread. She says she will hold the keys until someone worthy comes to collect them, and she doesn't mind if that someone is an idea rather than a person. She says tomorrow she will go to the corner again, and she will sit on the bench even if it is cold, and when people ask her why, she will say because cold does not scare me anymore. Back at the shed with the door panel, the hobbyist remembers something he forgot to mention because to him it was nothing. He points to a crate of assorted trim pieces sold by weight, a little economy of almosts. And under a rusted hood latch there is a scrap of carpet from a trunk. And under that a sticker printed with a serial a detective recognizes from the dealership's ledger. They take it with the delicacy reserved for bones and for very old paper. In the lab the carpet yields fragments of road grit layered like a cake. December, January, March. A winter of being opened and shut, and in the January slice the blue dye sings again, and a glitter that is not glitter, but mica from a particular de-icer lot delivered to a particular yard and used on a particular week that smells like a story closing its circle. The tech breathes out a word too soft to write in a report. Finally. The case grows teeth you can count, and still the heart of it stays in shadow. There is no body, there is no recorded scream, no witness whose eyes saw more than reflections. There is a scarf on a fence post that may or may not have been hers, and there is a wedge that held a door open for the worst reason. There is a mother who has outlived explanations and chosen ritual instead. There is a city that learned how to hold still and how to listen to the hum under its own skin. The detectives gather at the edge of the tunnels one more time, and the wind tastes like metal and rail and old pennies, and the man who once drew a circle toward the lake points down the corridor where the ghost on the tape placed its foot. And he says we know enough to speak and not enough to sleep. He puts his hand on the cold wall and the wall gives nothing back. and inside the wall, a memory presses its face and looks for a window. They widen the circle, and the circle bites back, old rosters dusted off and read like horoscopes, shift logs raised to light and studied for fingerprints of habit. And in the beige spill of a records room that smells like cardboard and coffee grounds, a clerk finds a maintenance order misfiled under a month with no business being there. A request to replace a cylinder in a service door 2 nights after she vanished, signed by a contractor who retired, died, left behind a garage full of half-used paint cans and secrets. And when they visit the address, the son opens the door, like grief taught him how. Says his father kept everything, says his father wrote everything down, says there might be a work order book in the shed if the raccoons haven't taken it for bedding. And in the shed, dust lifts in sunbeams like confetti at a funeral, and the book lies under a tarp, pages fat with years, and there in his father's hand is the service door job, timestamp 3:12 a.m. A note in the margin, cylinder chewed, unusual. The detectives pass the book like a relic through careful hands. The cylinder that was chewed opened on the corridor that led to the loading bay. Chewed is a word that does not belong to metal unless something tried hard enough to make it lie. They take the note to a locksmith with oil in his fingerprints who reads it like a poem, says a cylinder chews when a key that almost fits is forced, when a copy made on a machine out of calibration insists on being real, and he shows them bite marks like moons on brass and says a man who spends nights alone learns which doors believe lies. And they look at each other because the journal in the storage unit had a page about keys, dashes, and dots, a code only he could read, and the locksmith nods as if they already told him and says there is a way to teach a stranger door to trust you if you are patient and strong and wrong. They pull power logs from that week and the week after and the week before and find a hiccup in a breaker panel that feeds the camera grid, an 8-second death and a 10-second rebirth, the exact length needed to erase a sliver and call it a glitch, and they marry that hiccup to the 27th minute of the party tape, and the marriage is not happy, it is perfect. They test a door wedge against a controlled jam, and the leather holds with the tenacity of bad ideas. They pull the ex-wife back in, and she stares at the wedge like it is something she knew in a former life, and says he never liked to trust his hands, liked to trust tricks, liked to memorize shortcuts like other men memorize verses. And she starts to tell a story about a snowstorm in 2002 and stops because the ending is not hers to give, and she asks if she can go home now because talking turns the air into glass. A retired transit driver hears the radio news and calls the tip line with a voice wrapped in 20 winters, says he remembers a uniformed man on his late-night route that week, shoes white with salt, not like someone who had been standing outside waiting, more like someone who had been walking inside where salt piles at thresholds like small crimes, and he remembers because the man boarded through the back, no fare, a nod that said I belong, and he stood near the rear door and never swayed when the bus jolted a pothole, like men who know how to brace in moving rooms. And the driver thinks now about the time and the stop and the tunnel mouth and the exact 12 minutes that held a city by the throat, and the volunteer writes it down like a promise that grew a spine late. They search his old locker at a decommissioned site slated for demolition and find gum wrappers, a dead battery, a yellowing newsletter about a safety seminar no one ever enjoyed, and behind that a page torn from a paperback, half a paragraph that mentions snow and a streetlight and the feeling of being watched. And the detectives look at each other, and one says he reads at lunch like everyone else, and the other says some men curate their lives with scissors, and then a tiny slip falls from the locker seam, a bus transfer stub faded to ghost, date visible if you tilt it just right, 2001, the week, the hour. Evidence is a chorus of small voices. If you stand close enough, the sound becomes weather. The defense files to crush the party tape, chain of custody, chain of logic, chain of coincidence forged into a noose, he writes, and the prosecutor answers with a map drawn with the patience of surgeons and the cruelty of clocks, a route that breathes the shape of a night. The courtroom becomes a machine that converts breath into law. The judge listens the way a winter listens to footsteps, weighing compressions, measuring tempo, deciding which prints belong to people and which belong to wind. He rules the tape survives. He rules the wedge speaks. He rules science can say maybe narrows the world enough to walk through. They bring ground-penetrating radar to the corridor where the dog sat, and the concrete responds with its own language, an alphabet of echoes, layers of pore and patch and utility lines like veins, and in the map of reflections there is an anomaly, not a coffin, not a cavity, not a chest, but a disruption, an old saw cut that sealed something different than air, and then forgot to tell the floor about it. They cut carefully, apologies whispered for each inch, and the smell that climbs is older than law and softer than certainty. They bag dust the color of rust and write words in careful print that say nothing and everything. They do not tell the mother yet. They do not tell anyone who speaks for cameras. Mercy is airtight when it needs to be. In a lab, the gray scarf and the sweater and the trunk carpet and the door jamb varnish are introduced to machines that hum like lullabies for insomniacs. The scarf gives up a tiny triangle of red fiber not its own, buried deep where a knot once lived, red that matches the shrine scarf's dye family, not the same dye lot, not the same store, but a cousin in chemistry, kin enough to make a chart of neighbors. And the tech explains that scarves mingle in winter like stories in bars, and transfer is both miracle and curse, and the detective nods because chain reactions are how most nights end. The city settles into a stubborn kind of knowing. People who pass the corner touch the fence post without meaning to, a graze-like blessing, and a boy chalks a hopscotch grid where the shrine used to sit and writes in shaky capitals, safe now, and the mother sees it and feels both gratitude and the ache of letters that claim a future she cannot lean on. And she smiles anyway because small hands drew it and small certainties are allowed for children, even when the grown world is built on, perhaps. She sits on the bench and listens to the hum under the snow, the buried current that moves freight and light and people who keep secrets like talismans. They meet with the hobbyist, again, because stories grow a second harvest if you keep walking the field, and he remembers that the man who bought the door panel also bought a rubber mat cut to fit a trunk's bone. And the receipt shows a cut size that matches that sedan's mouth, and the mat was advertised as spill-proof. And the detective who reads catalog copy like literature says only people who expect spills care about phrases that promise to keep what happens inside from talking to the world. They find the mat under a workbench, knife scars like a stutter. It holds nothing now but the ghost of blue that chemistry confirms belongs to a batch of de-icer used that January and never again. A second retired coworker appears unannounced at the precinct, hair like smoke, voice like sand, says there was a night the freight elevator was checked out without a form. A pencil note on a scrap instead of ink in a log. A small rebellion that meant nothing then and everything now. And he remembered because the man who did it always used pencils, never pens, as if permanence offended him, as if he needed eraser dust to breathe. The detectives look at the suspect's interview forms and see the same thing, pencil pressure, the faint graphite shine that turns letters into mirrors. 1,000 tiny vanities make a person visible in a crowd. He sits across from them again, hands folded like a schoolboy practicing stillness, face drained to a blank that beguiles and repels. And they put the bus stub on the table, and they put the locksmith cylinder photo on the table, and they put the party tape freeze frame of the shoe on the wedge on the table. And the lawyer interrupts, says, "We are done here." And the detective ignores him, the way winter ignores a single warm breath, and says, "Tell me how you learned to keep a door open without being seen." And the man opens his mouth to say, "I don't recall," and closes it because the sentence feels frivolous in a room where gravity has declared itself. He asks for water. He drinks. He says something about drafts. He says something about broken hinges. He says something about policy. He says everything except the word yes. A neighbor from his building remembers a storage room down the hall that used to smell like cold metal and cheap detergent, a smell that arrived the week after she vanished and left a month later, a detail so small it hid under furniture, and she remembers because she took down her laundry late one night and heard a humming behind the wall like a portable generator or a secret, and she told herself it was nothing, because young mothers must tell themselves that to get sleep, and now she tells the detective because her child is grown and sleep is a different animal. The building superintendent confirms there was a room, confirms it was once his, confirms the lock was changed that winter because of a complaint about noise, confirms the complaint was anonymous and the key was returned with a crack at the corner like a tooth. The prosecutor drapes everything on a timeline until the line looks like a spine and the bones lock in place and the ribs hold, and she stands at her kitchen counter at midnight practicing the story without adjectives because juries trust verbs, and she circles the verbs: carried, wedged, reset, walked, opened, cut, replaced, sold, bought, erased, kept. She knows a case without a body is a bridge with crosswinds. She knows the lake keeps its dead when it wants to. She knows a corridor can be a grave if you never open the right door. She breathes and whispers the mother's name like a witness oath. She will not let the story volunteer to be small. He dreams in his cell. Men like him always do. He walks the corridor that now lives in other people's mouths, and the lights flicker and a door wedges and a hand hovers near the jamb, and he is young and older in the same frame. Time a yo-yo that refuses to sleep. And the shoes on his feet have that 6-month tread, and the sound they make is the sound of a city trying not to hear itself. He wakes. The room is concrete polite. He counts breaths and swallows the taste of old pennies and thinks of wedges and keys and the sound of tape starting and stopping and how for years he believed he had mastered the architecture of never. They bring the mother in to see someone about victim impact even before a verdict exists because impact is not a future tense, and she sits in a room with soft lamps and a box of tissues and a counselor who has heard so many winters speak that she can tell what season of silence belongs to. And the mother talks about keys and plants and the day the posters came down and how the wall looked naked and sorry. And she talks about buses and chalk and bench slats that remember weight. And when she runs out of talking, she breathes and holds the counselor's gaze and says what happens now. And the counselor says now is trial. And after that is afterward. And afterward is a country without maps. And the mother nods because she has lived there already. The judge sets a date. Reporters practice their cadence. A podcast releases a trailer with a bell tone and a whispered, "The door opened like a secret," and somewhere a college kid rolls her eyes, and somewhere a grandmother leans forward, and somewhere the janitor who saw the uniform in the elevator says he will not testify because his bones hurt, and his words do too, and then he calls back and says he will because some aches are called duty after enough nights. The city puts on its coat and waits at the corner as if the streetcar carries answers tucked behind the driver's glass. Snow threatens and relents. Salt dries to white maps along tires. Life does its busy work of continuing. They walk the route one more time at the exact hour, not because they doubt, but because repetition can turn fog into shape, and on the service stair the metal sings underfoot, and at the landing, the air changes note the way basements do, and in the loading bay, a gull cries once, as if it had business here. And the man who drew a circle to the lake years ago pauses with his hand on the cold rail and says out loud the name he has carried and returns it to the air, and the name seems to hang there longer than physics should allow, as if breath negotiated a small delay, as if the city agreed to hold for a beat. They stand in that beat. They listen to the machines hidden in the walls, to the water moving under the street, to the memory humming in concrete. And then they walk on because there is paperwork to sign and exhibits to label and a future to aim at carefully because futures scatter when pushed. When they step back outside, the sky is the color of old film and the streetlights click awake like a row of pilots lighting burners. And for a second, the city looks like its own photograph. He is not confessing. The lake is not returning. The scarf's dye is a cousin, not a twin. The wedge is a story told by leather and varnish. The bus stub is a ghost-made ink. But added together they point, and what they point at has edges now, and edges cut, and cuts bleed, and that is often how truth arrives, not as a monument, but as a handful of sharp things you cannot carry without changing the way you walk. The voice that has threaded this from the first step keeps talking, low, metronomic, building a bridge across the dark. 12 minutes, 24 years, one corridor, 1,000 hands, a mother waiting at a window, a city learning to breathe around a wound that finally has a shape. They push again at the seam where the story resists, and it gives a fraction, a breath thin as frost, enough to slide another question through, an early hearing under pale wood benches, and a judge whose patience carries the weight of winter, the defense chanting its litany, no body, no scene, no eyewitness, only tapes and fibers, and a vocabulary of perhaps, while the prosecutor answers with time itself, a map that does not blink, a clock that will not let go, a chain of minutes hammered into a spine that holds when you press. The party tape survives. The leather wedge is admitted. The corridor dust is allowed to speak in its quiet grammar of iron and dye and salt, and the city exhales and inhales again because breath is what it has practiced for 24 years. They comb payroll for what hid in plain sight, overtime clinging to nights nobody wanted, each approval a small yes that became a larger so. And he signed 2 extras the week she vanished, signed them with that careful pencil-quiet script, stayed on corridors where cameras hiccuped, logs that say control room, logs that say elevator bay, logs that say freight, a supervisor's margin note once trivial now ringing like a small alarm. Remind staff, door wedges not permitted. It's underlined heavy as if the pen knew it was writing to the future. A clinic on Danforth surrenders a cash receipt, January 2001, a thin line that reads superficial abrasion, right index knuckle, advised to keep clean, chart sparse, doctor's handwriting, a winter storm turned to hieroglyph, but another sentence plain enough to anchor a day, caught in door, and the prosecutor draws an arrow to the wedge and another to the locksmith's chewed cylinder and a third to the 27th minute of the party tape, where a shoe holds the world open and the chalk marks on her legal pad turn into a road you can walk at 2 in the morning without getting lost. The janitor who saw the uniform in the elevator practices his story in the mirror, hat on, hat off, decides the truth, wears no hat and leaves it at home. His wife in the doorway with hands folded and a mouth like a seam that says, "We have carried heavier things." He will testify. He will say the smell of heated wool and metal and pennies. He will say the leather sound on varnish when a shoe is in a hurry. He will say the light flickered and the man stared not at him, but into the place where reflection keeps its counsel. After dinner, a retired records clerk calls with a voice like paper pulled from a file, says she typed anonymous incident slips, notes staff left when they didn't want their names to live with their words. And that week, in 2001, the same hand appeared again and again, pencils never pens, loops heavy at the ends, letters pressed so hard the backs of the forms raised tiny ridges. She kept a blank as a sample because she liked the cardstock, and in faint graphite transfer it shows reset, cam, and wedge, written as if the words were ashamed of themselves. She mails it in a book mailer wrapped with twine like it contains a decade that still vibrates. They drive a slow lap around the corner where the shrine once trembled. A bus sighs to a stop and the driver nods because the city learns faces that push hard against time. Two teenagers climb aboard trading rumors dressed as certainty. Shock in the community. One says like a line from a trailer, the other says cold case like it has teeth. The mother sits 2 rows back and watches their breath fog a small world she does not enter. Keys in her pocket warming to her palm. Simple physics becoming liturgy. She rides 2 extra stops because leaving is harder when the corner knows your name. The scrapyard owner finds another ledger folded inside the first like a man's second mind. The white sedan appears again. 3 parts sold to 3 names that sound like characters who never got lines. Detectives knock on doors that open into rooms with quilts and trophies and calendars, holding birthdays of people who will never learn about corridors. A man with grease under his nails brings a glove box latch he kept as a spare, and in its tiny crease lives a sliver of blue salt trapped like a note you meant to burn. The lab says dye lot matches the de-icer batch the city used that January and never again. The trunk liner hums the same blue note so quietly a person could miss it. The case hums back. A city engineer unrolls drawings of the tunnels that predate cell service, and remember when payphones were ribs along the spine. He points to a booth that stood 2 blocks from the corridor mouth. The phone company keeps records the way trees keep rings. 1 number dialed at 2:19 a.m. A single ring, a hang-up, the mother's landline. The detective stares until lines blur to surf and does not tell her because mercy sometimes means not carrying words across a threshold. He circles the hour in pencil, and the circle looks like a bruise finally naming itself. The defense argues coincidence as a religion. Doors wedge for many reasons. Treads match many shoes. Trunk carpets carry other people's winters. DNA cousins do not make killers. The judge nods because law eats nuance for breakfast. The prosecutor holds the bus stub to the light and it shows its date like a faint pulse, holds the anonymous practice slips beside the interview forms, and the pressure peaks a line like mountains under snow, holds the clinic note next to the tape, and the space between claim and denial shrinks to a hallway you can cross in 6 steps. Jury selection spills questions that sound casual and mean everything. Can you live with maybe? Can you hold a line of inference without hating it? Can you hear a dog sit and not see a ghost? A teacher says yes. A carpenter says yes. A nurse believes in machines that hum and people who don't. A retiree says cameras lie and sometimes they don't lie enough. 12 are chosen plus alternates. A body made to listen. A throat made to hold one long, careful breath. A storm threatens and holds off. The lake puts on its iron face. Someone paints over a tag near the loading bay and finds older graffiti under it. We watch, scratched sharp as a whisper. A detective laughs once, without humor, because walls talk when you give them time. The prosecutor requests a site visit, not for drama, but for scale. Jurors stand in the corridor where the dog sat and look at the seam, where concrete kept its secret, and feel the cold that grows in rooms without windows. They count paces from freight door to mouth of night, and even those who are not built for math can feel 12 minutes compressed to a distance a person could carry a life if they refuse to set it down. The ex-wife returns a box from behind paint cans, inside patches from old uniforms, a coil of security tape used to label cables, a Polaroid from a break room party. In the photo, a crowd smiles at something off camera, while a door behind them is wedged by something just out of frame. A raffle jar full of tickets glows like a snow globe of numbers. He stands in a corner half-shadow, eyes not at the lens. The lab adjusts light until the wedge shines like a swallowed word. The prosecutor adds the photo to the spine not to prove but to show, the silhouette of a habit. They find the doctor who treated the knuckle. He remembers almost nothing because doctors are floodgates and days drown you. He reads his note and nods at his own cuneiform. Caught indoors, not diagnosis but courtesy to memory. Knuckles get chewed when hard things bite back. The defense asks if it could have been any door, and he says yes, and the courtroom hears no disguised as yes and hides it under a chair. The mother goes to the lake and lets the wind peel tears from her eyes, says her daughter's name into the iron, and waits for an echo that never comes, because lakes don't echo, they keep. She drops a single thread from her own scarf into the water, and a gull decides it is not food, and she smiles at the bird for being honest. She walks the rail line, counting ties, because counting is one way to keep breathing from running away. On tie number 100, she turns and heads for the corner without hurrying, because ritual has its own speed. An analyst finds a pattern in the key card outages, always at the first minute of the quarter hour, the way old systems handled resets, the way a person with a watch and a ritual could schedule trespass. The 27th minute sits 4 minutes after. The elevator stall the janitor saw is 4 minutes after. The convenience store camera gap ended 4 minutes after. Numbers march like a drumline you cannot unhear. The prosecutor strings them like beads, not yet for the jury, but for herself, so her hands remember the sequence when her mouth must be stone. The hobbyist who kept the mat calls with one last detail because the brain loves late confessions says the man who bought the door panel wore a jacket with a stitched surname that didn't match the bill of sale. He didn't notice then, he notices now. He writes the name on a slip, and the letters carry the same graphite weight as the anonymous slips and the interview forms and the pencil on pencil of a life that refused ink. The detectives sleeve the paper like a moth's wing and set it among exhibits that hum, even when the room is empty. In the lab, a young tech runs spectral analysis on the dust cut from the corridor seam. The report reads like a recipe: calcium, silica, iron, hemoglobin, peptides at the edge of detection, salt, blue dye ghost. The defense will say contamination, and the lab will say procedure, and the jury will hear two honest songs at once and decide which melody to hum on the walk home. The prosecutor learns again to respect what juries do with twin truths and shapes her story, not as a sledge, but as a steady hand guiding a fingertip along a relief map until the ridges make sense. He fires his lawyer and gets one like a scalpel. The new counsel walks the corridor and stands very still for a long time, listens to the hum and then to the silence, returns to tell his client what clients hate to hear. Jurors will not love you. We must teach them to doubt the floor, to bow to coincidence, to fear certainty. His client stares at the table as if it might open and drop him into a place without minutes. A podcast episode drops, and the city splits into people who listen now and people who swear they won't and do. The narrator whispers Matik Bian and translates and lets the phrase cool in the room. A caller tells a story about a friend of a friend, and it is useless. And still it fills a minute, and still the tip line logs it, because sometimes the stiffest door opens to a useless knock followed by the right one. Voir dire ends, and the judge speaks words that feel ceremonial because they are. The courtroom arranges itself into final positions. The mother behind the rail, shawl like soft armor. The detective who once drew a circle to the lake, taking a back bench and pressing his knees to wood until it remembers him. The suspect in a suit he did not choose and a tie he did not tie. Hands folded, knuckles healed into the past. He looks up once and sees no one he recognizes because recognition is a mercy the room does not grant. Opening statements wait like weather at the edge of town. Exhibits will stack. The wedge will travel in a clear box like a relic. The party tape will play, and the 27th minute will bow. The trunk carpet will hum its quiet blue note. The bus stub will pulse like a vein. The pencil ridges will rise like hills under snow. The dog's sit will be described, and some juror will study their own palms. Because it helps when rooms get tight. The city will lean forward in living rooms and break rooms and bars with televisions bolted to corners. Shock in the community will ride the crawl again. Cold case will float in the anchors' mouths like steam in cold air. And yet, inside the courthouse, the voice is low, even, clipped, like a metronome teaching a heartbeat to hold pace. They push once more at the seam, and this time it gives a breath more, enough for one more truth to slip through. 12 minutes can be a country and a flag and a law. 24 years can be a bridge built slow and crossed slower. A mother can be a continent steady and holding. A city can teach itself to breathe around an absence until the absence has edges, and those edges can be held, and the trial begins, not with thunder, but with paper, and oath, and the sound of chairs, as people settle into the work of listening, while snow, somewhere, remembers to fall. The room settles into a hush that tastes like paper and winter air, gone stale. And the judge takes the bench with the gravity of a clock striking, and the prosecutor stands where the wood gleams and begins without embroidery, verbs marching first, nouns carrying their own weight, a narrow road laid out in present tense so no one can wander. And she speaks the language of doors and minutes and corridors under lights that never sleep. of a 27th minute preserved in cheap tape and bad office cheer, of a wedge cut from a belt and trained to disobey gravity, of keycard outages cued like metronome ticks, of a trunkliner singing a quiet blue note from a die the city used in January 2001, and never again of a bus stub faded to a pulse and a clinic note that tried to be nothing and failed, of a pencil hand that pressed letters hard enough to leave a mirror ridge on the page beneath, and she does not say inevitability, she says accumulation. She does not say monster, she says man. She points not with fingers, but with the itinerary of a night. The defense rises into the same air and coats it with doubt, not theatrical, surgical, cuts gentle enough to pass for caresses. No body, no scene, no scream captured and saved, no confession, only interference, coincidence, contamination, the way winter sticks to everything, and then lies about who it loved first. He asks the jury to resist narrative gravity, to refuse the comfort of a straight line, to honor what isn't known louder than what is. He sits, the bench breathes, the clocks continue their private work. The first witness is the lab tech with patient hands. She carries precision like a lit candle. She explains fibers without romance. She maps how scarves become small weather systems and leave threads like snow. She says dye families like cousins at a reunion, not identical, related. She says the blue in the trunk liner and the blue in the mat and the blue at the corridor seam all sang the same song in different octaves. January's de-icer humming years after it dried. She is kind to the record, careful with her verbs, allergic to overreach. The defense asks about contamination and she says procedure. He asks about error rates and she gives numbers. He asks if science can shout yes, and she says science usually speaks in ranges, and still, the range here is narrow enough to force a choice. The jury watches her mouth when she says narrow, the way narrow carries the suggestion of a corridor. The locksmith is next, hands nicked by decades, a map of small, honest injuries. He holds a brass cylinder and shows bite marks nobody at the back can see and everyone feels. He teaches the room how a key that almost fits chews metal, how insistence leaves its own handwriting. He reads the contractor's note, cylinder chewed, unusual, like scripture to a very small church. He explains how a man with time and access could learn which doors forgive lies. The defense smiles and says any door can be stubborn, any key can be cheap, any cylinder can fail, and the locksmith nods because the world is full of almosts. And then he says this: patterns make families of accidents, and this pattern is a family with a surname. The jury writes nothing and remembers everything. The janitor takes the stand with a hat he leaves on the empty chair beside him like a friend. He smells of soap and elevator oil, even after all these years. He tells the part he saw. Doors stuck between floors. Light flicker, a uniform in a mirror without a face because the man did not look at him. He looked at his own reflection as if bargaining. The wool heat smell, the penny taste air, the sound leather makes on varnish when in a hurry. His voice is a low drum. He does not embellish. The defense asks about memory and years and the way recollection borrows colors from stories told later. He says yes. Memories do that. This one does not. He steps down with his hat, and the room looks smaller after him. The retired records clerk with the paper voice testifies to the anonymous incident slips, to pencil loops and heavy endings, to graphite ridges printing a ghost on the next page, to the phrases reset, cam, and wedge appearing like a whisper catechism over several days in that week no one forgets. She kept a blank because she liked the cardstock. The defense asks if she can swear the hand is the defendant's, and she says no, she can swear it is a hand that writes like his, and the judge reminds the jury about inference and identity and the difference between cousin and twin. Paper does not blush. It simply holds. The hobbyist with the shed arrives in a jacket with a tear his wife mended badly. He brings the trunk mat, the door panel, the glove box latch with a crease thin as a vein. He is nervous, the way honest men get when dragged into other people's storms. He points to knife scars on the mat. He tells how the buyer wore a jacket stitched with a surname that didn't match the bill of sale. He says he noticed only now because the world has taught him what matters years too late. He leaves the room apologizing to no one for loving old metal more than he should. In a corner, a detective writes a single line. He kept everything. The line does not specify who he is. The city breathes around the courthouse like an animal in winter, energy stored, waiting to leap. The mother sits behind the rail, her shawl soft armor, her keys a small sun in her palm. She studies the faces of the 12 people who borrowed her future for a little while and gave nothing back yet, and she forgives them in advance because forgiveness is a muscle she has trained in private. At recess, she steps into the hall and stands near a window that looks toward the corner where the shrine once shook, and she almost lifts her hand as if to wave to a place. The detective who drew a circle to the lake stands nearby and pretends not to guard her. She pretends not to know. They play the party tape. The room's temperature changes a fraction, enough to tighten throats. Pixels bloom and die. Faces shine with cheap laughter. The raffle jar glows like captured snow. At the 27th minute, a door opens to a sliver. A shoe wedges. A badge grazes jam. The freeze frame lands with the weight of a small planet. Nobody speaks for a count of 5. You can hear breath. You can hear the thin whine of electronics remembering their age. The defense asks for context and gets it, asks if the shoe could be any shoe, and the text says the tread lived 6 months and died forever. Could be a handful of shoes, not any shoe. A family of shoes with a small surname. He nods like a man writing a list that isn't his. A transit driver testifies about salt-dusted shoes and the way a man can stand on a moving bus and not sway if he has practiced bracing in rooms that move. He remembers the time because he wrote it in his log, a habit that saved him years later. He says the man nodded like he belonged to the city. The defense says lots of men nod. The driver says not like that. The room decides what that means without consulting the transcript. The engineer with tunnel maps lays paper across the rail like river charts. He points to a saw cut under concrete. He does not promise graves. He promises disruptions. He tells how the floor is a book if you learn to read echoes. He cannot say blood. He can say iron and peptides and dust that remembers more than it should. The defense says the city is old. Old cities crease. The engineer agrees, and the crease remains. He sits at the defense table, suit stiff, eyes rehearsed to seem blameless, knuckles healed to history. He watches the party tape and does not blink at the shoe he wore. He watches the wedge travel past in its clear box and keeps his mouth shut while the room's air leans toward it. He whispers once to his lawyer, and the lawyer nods like men nod when they agree not to be surprised in public. When the clerk reads out "caught indoor" from the clinic note, a line that wanted to be small, he lifts his water and lets the rim stall at his lip, a pause that admits nothing and performs everything. A juror catches herself counting steps from the witness chair to the counsel table the way she counted paces in the site visit corridor, and she imagines how 12 minutes can be subdivided into gestures and breaths and key swipes and hesitations and tiny oaths and the soft sound leather makes when it bites varnish. She presses her palm to her thigh to stop the counting and fails. Numbers have learned her mouth. On day 3, the ex-wife returns with a box labeled cables that hides a smaller box taped and retaped, an altar of anxiety cardboard. Inside, lanyards, a laminate with its name scraped to a ghost, patches, a spiral notebook with roots and columns and arrows like migration lines. In the margins, remember 4, always check 3, camera resets at 2 if coaxed. The underline is shaky in a way a machine can measure. The prosecutor measures it. The defense asks if notes prove guilt or just show a man who likes order. The prosecutor says order can be a net. Anything can be a net if you throw it enough times. A young analyst testifies about clocks and outages. He lays out a cadence, quarter-hour resets 4 minutes after marks, camera gaps like polite storms, the party tape's wedge aligning with a metronome not visible to human eyes, but loyal as dog instinct. He says probability leans here so hard it leaves a dent. The defense says dents can be illusions. Jurors have sat on benches that left marks. The analyst smiles because he likes clever, and then he gently returns the room to the line of numbers that do not care about charm. Between witnesses, the city keeps functioning because cities are machines that refuse to stop unless someone pulls the world's plug. The lake wears its iron face. The streetcars mutter their bell grammar. A podcast drops a new episode with a trailer whispering the word corridor like a spell. People in barbershops practice saying investigative genetic genealogy as if fluency confers expertise. Teenagers chalk on the sidewalk. Safe now, and then add a question mark, and then rub it out with a sleeve, undeciding in public. The mother waters the plant and apologizes when droplets bruise a leaf. She turns the keys in her palm and remembers the exact sound they made in a door that winter, a small brass applause. She hears it at night, sometimes applause, sometimes a lock, laughing. The defense calls a former coworker, opining that the defendant was boring, punctual, forgettable, the kind of man buildings grow like mildew. The prosecutor thanks him and asks about a snowstorm in 2002 and a camera that needed coaxing, and he remembers suddenly more than he planned to, how the defendant liked to fix small problems off the books to collect small favors like coins, how he hated pens, how his pencil stubs were chewed at the back. The jurors look down at their own pens as if accused. On cross, the defense juggles every maybe into the air at once and lets them glitter. Fiber cousins, door cylinders that chew for benign reasons, dyes that repeat, tape artifacts that mimic wedges, dogs that sit for ghosts and for the memory of meat, janitors who confound winters, drivers whose logs grow heroic over time. He does it well. The room feels the tug of the easier story. This is all fog. Resist the lighthouse. The prosecutor stands and does nothing theatrical. She collects every glittering maybe and threads it back in the order of the night. Shoe, wedge, door, key, corridor, elevator stall, bus, trunk, mat, blue, clinic, pencil, slips, party tape, wedge again, door again, corridor again. Midnight's hum, 12 minutes. The fog thins because fog respects sequence the way water respects gravity. He will not testify. His lawyer says nothing and says it again with pained eloquence. The jury is told not to imagine what he would have said. They are told to not fill silence with their own voices. They are told, as if telling has ever worked on human minds. That night, one juror dreams of a scarf on a fence post and wakes with the taste of wool. Another dreams of a door wedge that looks like a tongue. Another dreams of a lake that refuses faces. In the morning, they drink courthouse coffee and agree silently not to speak about dreams. The detective who drew a circle to the lake takes the stand last that day. His voice is low, steady, metronome on human legs. He tells how cold cases do their work in the dark, how breakthroughs in stories look like lightning and in life feel like a click you didn't notice until the door swung. He does not claim heroics. He tells a chronology with mercy for no one, not even himself. He says he once drew a line to the lake because lines need somewhere to go, and that was faith, not evidence. He says the party tape was chance, the mat was thrift, the ledger was stubbornness, the dog was honesty, the mother was endurance, and the rest was people showing up with small pieces and not leaving when asked to. The defense thanks him for his service and then asks why the lake did not give back what it took, as if that absence is an alibi. He says lakes do not work for us. He steps down. The mother watches him pass and lets her hand hover and then lower because public rooms require restraint. In the hallway, a reporter whispers into a camera about shock in the community and finds herself, for once, whispering honestly. Behind her, the cold tilts its head against the glass and listens. The day recesses. The judge's gavel is the lid on a quiet box. The city slides its coat on and goes back to being itself under streetlights that bloom like patient flowers. He rides the elevator down in cuffs no one sees because the angle of the corridor denies spectacle. And he looks at the brushed metal and tries again to negotiate with his own reflection, and the reflection has stopped listening. Night carries the trial home like an ember in a mitten. The mother sits in her chair by the window and counts 100 breaths and then stops, because counting sometimes brings you back and sometimes takes you away, and she is not afraid of either now. On the corner, the fence post remembers pressure. A child's chalk lingers in the cracks like ash from a kind fire. Far below, the tunnels hum, and the seam they cut rests with gauze over its wound, and air travels as if corridors had lungs. Snow rehearses in the high cloud ceiling and decides tomorrow. The voice that has threaded the city since the suitcase wheels clicked along a cracked sidewalk does its metronome work, no faster, no slower, teaching hearts to keep time with the facts. 12 minutes folded into 24 years. A wedge arguing with a door, a pencil pressing through paper, a mother holding keys like a bright small animal that purrs without sound, and a city learning, again, to breathe in the presence of edges. Snow tests the courthouse glass with a fingertip and decides to wait, and the day opens like a file drawer, smooth, metal, inevitable. The jurors taking their seats, with the quiet choreography of people practicing reverence, and the judge nods to the prosecutor and the line resumes where it left off, a metronome picking up its tick without apology. A telephone engineer with hair like wire climbs into the witness chair and unrolls a thin history of copper and dial tones, says the landline company keeps logs older than some jurors, paper that remembers which circuits flexed and when, and he points to a line for January 2001 at 2:19 a.m., one ring, hang up, no voice recorded because back then you needed a machine to trap sound and this house did not have one. The name on the account is the mother's. He says misdials happen. He says this was a clean pulse, the kind of fast break that comes from someone knowing when to stop, not from a finger sliding. The defense asks if snow can bend lines, and he says, winter does many things, this wasn't one of them. The mother does not look up, her keys warm under her thumb. A detective rubs a coin in his pocket that he pretends is for luck and admits is for the need to move something small. At lunch, the prosecutor steps into a quiet office, takes a breath like lifting a box, and tells the mother what the engineer said. She does not dress it, she does not say closure, she says a ring, one, the week, the hour. The mother smiles the way people smile when they hear a language they once knew and forgot they still understand. She asks if she can touch the paper where the ring lives. The prosecutor says later, because exhibits still belong to the room. The mother nods and says she will light a candle for that single sound tonight, not because it helps, because it marks. Ritual is a way to assign weight to what already weighs everything. The next witness brings a small plastic bag containing a thing out of fashion, a micro-cassette recorder with a sticker from a long-gone electronics chain peeling at the corners. A man found it in a box he bought at a municipal auction, a lot labeled surplus containing a tangle of cords and the smell of old offices. And he pressed play because thrift stores are full of other people's voices and curiosity is a low-cost vice. And he heard static, then a hum like a steam pipe, then a voice flattening words into instruments, reset camera, freight door wedge, fix in the morning, and a date spoken like a password, Jan 201. He did not know what it meant until the news taught him, and he brought it here wrapped in 2 plastic grocery bags as if that could protect time. The room leans forward without moving. The prosecution offers chain of custody scaffolding, the auction ledger, the surplus manifest, the storage label matching the decommissioned control room. The defense stands to block it, questions provenance, suggests prank and paste, calls it garbage. The judge frowns at the word garbage. The judge lets the jury hear, with limits, no voice identification, context only. The jury learns how to listen to a hum. They play the tape. Static flutters like moths. Then that hum, low, constant, the kind of mechanical breath that sits under cities. Someone, a man, speaks as if smiling would break a rule. Reset cam. Freight door wedge. Fix in the morning. No names, no thrill, just posture, a cadence of ownership and small disobedience. The lab later testifies that the hum's acoustic signature matches a particular mechanical room. Hydrogen hiss, pump cycle, the spectral fingerprint of a space on the corridor's shoulder. The defense calls it coincidence, says pipes hum everywhere, cities hum everywhere. Echo is a liar, memory is a thief. The prosecutor says pipes hum differently. Machines sing their own quiet anthem. The jury does not know whether to call it song. They add it to the weight the case carries anyway. An old bartender takes the stand and says he remembers an argument that week and then admits he might be remembering. He says the defendant came in sometimes for coffee in silence, never beer. He says the night in question, his register jammed, the bell didn't ding, small details that felt important later because nothing else did. The prosecutor folds him gently, thanks him for honesty, moves on. The defense fishes, tries to hook a phantom ex-boyfriend out of nothing, holds up a rumor and hopes it will find protein when it bites air. The rumor starves. It dies before the judge needs to warn it. A coworker brought by the defense says the defendant was dull, dependable, a man who loved laminate and fluorescent light, a man buildings made more of. He says the defendant lent him a pencil once and he forgot to give it back and he found himself chewing it without thinking. And the prosecutor smiles like someone recognizing a melody and asks him to write a sentence on a piece of cardstock, any sentence. And he writes wedges not permitted because the sign hung over the bay for years. And the letters bite deep enough to bruise the paper beneath. And the prosecutor lays the anonymous slips beside it and the ridge pattern aligns like teeth at the edge of a door. The defense objects, the judge sustains, the jury has already seen. In the lab, they bring out the wedge again, the leather smooth as recited prayer, and the chemist with gentle hands paints light across its edge and reads fluorescence like a map. Varnish from a limited batch product used on only a dozen doors in the complex, one of them the freight bay from the tape's 27th minute. He says glue remembers even when leather forgets. The defense says doors travel, fragments hitch rides. The room feels the tug of doubt and then feels the grid hold when the prosecutor overlays the map of those 12 doors onto the patrol routes in the spiral notebook. And the two patterns do not just cross, they nest. They share a heartbeat. Somewhere behind all this, a gull screams once and stops, as if admitting in bird language that humans sometimes build a case out of feathers and wind and somehow it hangs. The detective returns to the stand to speak about the bus stub and the ride and the driver's log and the quarter-hour cadence of outages, how clocks made by different hands decided to nod at the same minute, and how that is either choir or coincidence. In either way, it is architecture. He is calm. He is taut as wire. He admits to mistakes. He admits to the line to the lake he drew in pencil on a map in his first year on the case because grief needs a direction. He says the corridor gave him one later. The defense asks if he ever loved this case too much. He says we do not get to choose what teaches us patience. The jury writes nothing down and holds on to his voice. Late in the day, the mother takes the stand to describe an ordinary week. The prosecutor keeps it strict. Last call, last message, last sighting. No grief unless grief helps locate a time. The mother speaks as if reciting ingredients for a cake she hasn't baked in 24 years. Tuesday, milk, change for laundry. Boots, please call when you get in. The defense does not cross. He has learned, at least, which doors will slam on his fingers. The mother steps down without looking at the table where her daughter's keys do not lie because evidence does not traffic in metaphor. She returns to her bench and takes the keys out of her pocket and holds them anyway. The defense moves for acquittal on the mechanics. No body, no scene, no confession, no singular yes. The judge denies with a paragraph that sounds like someone measuring lumber. The trial keeps walking. Witnesses blur at the edges now into a procession. The engineer with the saw cut, the tech with blue dye, the clerk who found the misfiled maintenance order, the son of the contractor who said cylinder chewed meant a man argued with a door and won the argument by force, not by permission. Each adds mass. Each drags maybe toward likely like a slow river banks a boat. Outside, the radio towers trade gossip with the clouds. Inside, the defense leans on contamination, on chain of custody, on the thousand little ways truth can smudge when too many hands touch it. He calls a pathologist to say absence is scientifically noisy. He calls a philosopher in a tweed jacket and a polite beard to tell the jury stories help us sleep, and we should fear them for that. He is good. He smooths the case into fog and asks the jury to love fog. The prosecutor lets him have his weather and then brings back the map, the hours, the doors, the wedge, the tape, the bus, the stub, the die, the pencil, the slip, the hum, the call, the quarter-hour tick, the 4 minutes after echo, the mat, the trunk, the glitter of mica that isn't glitter at all. It is geography you can measure. She asks the jury to love the ground. On the morning snow finally falls, the judge warns the room about slippery steps and then calls the next witness, an acoustician who lives in the world of echoes. He does not pretend voice print certainty. He says rooms talk. He says the tapes hum, and a field recording from the corridor's neighboring mechanical room are siblings. He says someone could have faked it, and then proceeds to explain how hard faking becomes when you need walls to sing back the right note to your microphone. He speaks like a math teacher who refuses to lie. The defense thanks him and suggests 100 rooms hum this way. He says 97 do not, 2 probably do, 1 certainly does. The jury loves numbers with edges. The prosecutor rests at last, not with a flourish, with paperwork. The judge asks if the defense will call more. He will call one, a security consultant who will say wedges are sometimes practical in emergencies. The consultant smiles cleanly. He says in extraordinary circumstances, doors must be convinced to help. The prosecutor asks if the party on the tape sounded like a fire. He says no. She asks if company policy permitted leather surgery to protocols. He says no. She asks if extraordinary circumstances make blue dye sing the same note in 3 places. He says he doesn't understand dye. The jury understands enough. Rebuttal is a gentle thing. The engineer returns with a graph that shows the outage pattern again because repetition turns fog into shape. And the lab tech returns with a full chain on the mat because care is something you can diagram. The judge nods like a man watching carpenters measure twice. He sets closing for the next morning. The room exhales and then realizes breathing has been work all along and work will continue until someone says finished. Night brings wind with it. The mother rides the bus to the corner where chalk says safe now and then says nothing because snow already rode over it. She lights a single tea candle on the sidewalk and shields it with a jar. She whispers thank you to the One Ring and to the man at the auction who pressed play and to the clerk who liked cardstock and to the janitor who wore his hat to court and to the man who sells scrap, who saved a latch because thrift is a religion, and to the dog who sat because honesty can be taught, and to the detective who drew the wrong line first and kept the pencil anyway. She whispers nothing to the lake because the lake does not answer. She does not mind. Some silences have earned the right. He sleeps badly if he sleeps. The hum of jail, not the hum of corridor. The reflection in the polished door, a man he did not plan for. And his lawyer explains in a calm that could be rented out that tomorrow they will ask 12 people to hold fog, and 12 people might, and 12 people might not. And either way, the corridor does not change its note, and the wedge does not forget the varnish, and the mat does not scrub its mica, and the pencil never learned to write without pressing. He nods and counts familiar doors and tries to find one that opens to before. Before no longer has a door. The city dreams without permission. The detective dreams that he returns the circle he drew to the lake, and the lake hands him a corridor in exchange, straight as a rule, and he wakes at 3 and writes a line to no one, edges or love. In the morning he will iron his tie and sit in the back and try not to look like a man praying. The prosecutor will drink coffee that tastes like coin and go over verbs one more time and cross out every adjective that smells like music. The defense will polish the word coincidence until it gleams like a tool. The jury will arrive in boots with salt maps on them like evidence of travel. The judge will sit down with the authority of a metronome starting up its tick again and remind them that story is not law, but law requires a story to walk in. And the voice that has threaded this since the suitcase wheels kissed cracked concrete will keep its pace. Doors and minutes and corridors and hum, a mother with keys. A city that learned to breathe around a seam and now feels it giving. 12 minutes, 24 years, 1 room, 1 tape, 1 wedge, 1 call, 1 family of treads that lived half a season, and in living, left their small geometry on snow that remembers. Tomorrow the talking will end for a while, and the listening will begin again under oath inside 12 skulls where snow falls and melts and leaves salt behind. Morning hits the courthouse in a pale blue wash, the kind of light that makes marble look like bone. People shuffle in quietly, scarves dusted with snow, the air sharp with that pre-verdict hush that clings to cities right before they exhale. The judge clears his throat, his voice the metronome that starts the day, and the clerk calls the room to order. Outside, the streetcars grind along Queen Street, the bells a distant echo of another winter. Inside, the trial has narrowed to a single breath. The prosecutor stands, palms open, no papers in her hands this time. She begins softly, and the jury leans forward before she's even asked them to. She talks about time, 12 minutes stretched across 24 years, about how time can hide a body, blur a face, erase footprints, but cannot silence a pattern. She walks them through the corridor again, not as evidence, but as heartbeat, the wedge, the shoe, the hum, the clock that hiccuped, the phone that rang once and never again. She names each object as if summoning ghosts and reminds them that ghosts are only the parts of truth we have not yet buried. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't have to. The silence in the room has its own gravity. He thought doors could keep secrets, she says, but doors are built to open. A pause. He thought time would keep him safe, but time has a habit of remembering. She steps away from the lectern, her hands trembling, and lets the words sit like frost on glass. The judge nods once. The defense rises, slow, measured, eyes on the floor until they're not. He starts with science, with the language of doubt, with the space between proof and story. They want you to believe in ghosts, he says, but belief isn't evidence. Coincidence isn't crime. He leans into reason, lets his voice drop until it's almost kind. No confession, no body, no witness who saw the act. Only lines drawn years later by people desperate for a shape that makes sense. He gestures toward the mother in the back row. We all want sense, but wanting is not knowing. The prosecutor does not flinch. The mother does not blink. Outside, snow begins to fall again, soft, thin, soundless. The defense closes his notes and ends where he began. The absence of proof, he says, is not proof of guilt. He sits. The judge instructs the jury with the patience of someone who has repeated these words 100 times and knows they will still land heavy. 12 heads nod. 12 hearts begin their slow climb through fog. They file out, the door closing behind them like a vault. Hours start to stretch. The courthouse breathes and waits. Reporters whisper, pencils still, lights dimmed. Somewhere a radiator clicks like a nervous metronome. The detective sits on the back bench, coat folded on his lap, the map of the lake alive behind his eyes. He remembers the first night he stood at the fence post, the red scarf fluttering, the candles trembling in glass jars, the way the cold pressed into his bones and whispered, "You'll never find her." He remembers the years after, the dead ends, the half-leads, the evidence boxes stacked like gravestones. He rubs the coin in his pocket again, the one he never spends, a superstition he will never name. The mother sits by the window in the witness waiting room, eyes on the snow that keeps falling, melting as it hits the sill. She hums a song her daughter loved, something from the radio that winter, and she hums it without melody, just rhythm, tick, pause, tick, the sound of a heart relearning how to move. 3 hours pass, then 5, then 7. Night seeps into the corners of the courthouse. The jury's door stays shut. The defense taps his pen in 4s. The prosecutor watches the ceiling lights flicker with the rhythm of exhaustion. Finally, at 10:47 p.m., a knock. Short, sharp, everyone stands. The foreperson steps in, a woman with the posture of someone who has carried a secret for too long. The judge asks the question he always asks. "Have you reached a verdict?" She says yes. The clerk takes the folded paper, walks it across the room, the sound of shoes on tile loud as thunder. The judge unfolds it, reads in silence first, then aloud, and the room changes temperature in an instant. Guilty. The word is small, simple, 5 letters long, but it splits the air like a blade. The mother doesn't cry. She closes her eyes. Her lips move once. Thank you. To no one in particular. The detective exhales, the sound closer to a prayer than a breath. The defendant sits, stone-faced, only his fingers moving, tracing invisible circles on the table, the muscle in his jaw flickering like a bad light. His lawyer leans close, whispers something that dies halfway between comfort and protocol. Cameras click. The judge thanks the jury for their service and tells them they've done their duty to the truth. No one moves. No one quite believes it's over. When they lead him out, he doesn't fight. He looks at the floor tiles, at the pattern that repeats every 4 squares, at the seam between them, and for the first time in 2 decades, he looks small. Outside, the press lights burst white against the snow, voices tumbling over one another. Shock in the community. Cold case solved. Justice after 24 years. He ducks his head, the same gesture as the man in the party tape, and disappears into the van's shadow. The doors slam. The sound echoes up the courthouse walls, ricocheting through stairwells, corridors, air ducts, as if the building itself is letting go of breath it didn't know it was holding. Later, when the crowd thins and the lights dim, the detective walks out into the cold. The city is quiet. Street lamps pool yellow light on the snow, and every footstep sounds like closing a file. He turns toward the lake. It's still frozen, a mirror for the sky. He stops where the ice meets the dock, where 24 years ago he drew a line on a map that ended in water, and for the first time, he feels that line straighten. He drops the coin into the dark and listens for the splash. There isn't one, only silence, long and clean. The mother stands at the corner where the shrine once burned low. She sets a candle on the fence post again. It leans in the wind but stays lit. She pulls from her coat pocket a small paper tag bent at the corner, a suitcase brand name half faded by time, and presses it into the snow. Then she sits on the bench, her daughter's keys clinking in her palm, and watches the wax pool. She doesn't say goodbye. She just whispers, "We're home." And the words rise in a puff of steam that disappears before anyone can hear them. Back in evidence storage, the wedge sits in its clear box, tagged and cataloged. The tape rests beside it, brittle now, a small coil of history. The corridor is sealed off, scheduled for demolition next spring. The city will repave the floor, repaint the walls, erase the hum, but cities never forget. Somewhere in the new concrete, the echo of a door opening and a voice whispering, "Reset cam," will remain. Too quiet for machines, just loud enough for memory. Snow thickens. Lights blink out one by one. The lake exhales. The story folds itself closed. But the wind keeps telling it. In alleys and subways, in the thin crackle of the air. A reminder that time remembers everything, and that silence, if you listen long enough, will give you names.